Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. Interesting days that we live in, and give us a chance to talk about all those interesting days. Hope everybody's doing well. Try and resist the temptation just to jump right into this thing. Just as some small talk prior to, while we let the audience build. I'd mentioned I've got this new schedule, which seems to be working, although it's certainly taken me some time to, kind of really hit the rhythm of it. But when I was looking at the stuff that's there and talking about 4 new shows now with a regular Beat Harris segment, which I'll talk about in a minute, I've decided to hold on to things to come until the election. And the reason that I've decided to hold on to things to come until the election is because the election is going to tell me and all of us whether we're in for a hard landing or a soft landing. Everybody wants the soft landing and Donald Trump being elected, and we'll obviously be talking about this a lot tonight. But, having watched what we've watched the last couple of weeks, the hard landing may be unavoidable. The main thing to stick with is this cyclical idea of history. So, in any event, we'll come back to that. Let me think here. There was one. So anyway, I'm doing the How to Beat Harris thing. I took a look at the first one, and the first one I wrote it out like a firewall script, and I had to read it, and I'm very aware of this. I'm very aware of people who read their teleprompter lines and their eyes go back and forth like this, and it drives me nuts. So in order for me to get past that, I had to make the type narrow, and to make it narrow, I had to make it small. So it's so small I could hardly read it. But looking back at that video, I realized that was a mistake to do that. It put that first episode into a dead zone between something that is scripted like Firewall, which you expect to be scripted and has a certain level of presentation. It took it out of there and also took it out of what we're doing right now, which is spontaneous talking. All the live action talking I've done, all the speaking events I've done with just a series of note cards. So that's what I'm going to be doing from now on, because it felt static to me. It felt a little flat. So I wanted to write it because I wanted it to be, really sharp. I didn't want to miss anything. But I'm going to do what I did for speaking events for the next one. I'm just make a series of notes, and then if I need to pull it up, I'll just go ahead and tighten it up. But generally speaking, I think that's probably what we'll do. Usually the audience builds up over time as we get rolling and the word goes out. So I'm going to hold off on really, jumping into the main topic, although there's a lot of main topics today. One of them is the I don't even know how to even to start describing this problem, but the more I see of I watch a lot of stuff that's, in fact, I watch nothing political. I never watch any political shows ever. I don't watch any of the commentators. I just don't. And so I watch. I used to watch a lot of gaming channels, not so much anymore. A lot of pop culture channels, not so much anymore. A lot of Get Your Drinks Ready. A lot of police body cam videos, not so much anymore. I've been looking at a lot of these MGTOW videos lately. And for those of you who are not up on the term, MGTOW is an acronym for Men Going Their Own Way. And it's something like in excess of 60% of young men now are just, they're not even, forget about not being in relationships or married. They're just done. They're completely over it. And it's not just a paper phenomenon, because a lot of these videos that I watch are videos of women, either middle-aged women, but more and more often young women in their 20s, talking about how nobody is approaching them anymore, that men won't approach them. And many of these videos, they just openly come out and say, men, come on, step up your game, we won't bite, come on, come on and approach us. And it's pretty much universal in these videos that what they're saying is essentially attractive men come up and approach us. I've seen any number of them, and after a while they just become essentially just the same loop. But the loop has a lot of validity to it, and it's really even further messing up our society. This social media and TikTok seems to be particularly toxic. In fact, it's not a mystery, it's a Chinese spyware app, but really what it is it's a Chinese destroy the culture app. And the way it does that is by making public conversations that should be in private, and the power of TikTok is the power of social proof rather. Just for those of you unfamiliar with it, we've talked about it a few times. Just go over it very briefly. Social proof is peer pressure. It's the most powerful influencer of human psychology. They've done any number of studies on social proof, and what they found is that people will conform to what other people want of them over their most firmly held beliefs. And the most dramatic example of social proof is an experiment where people would sign up to be part of this psychological experiment. So they'd get all of these test subjects, and the test subjects would walk into a room, and everybody in the room would have a clipboard, and they'd say, "Can you fill this out?" And what the test subject didn't know was that the other 19 of the 20 test subjects in the room, the other 19 were in on the experiment. And basically, what happens is a professor, authority figure, comes out, and he's holding up a board, and he's got one string on the top that's somewhat longer than the string on the bottom. It's not noticeably, but it is noticeably, but it's not, crazy extreme. Anybody can look at that and see. And so he basically goes around the room. The test subject is number 20, and he says, okay, just as a general perception thing from a distance, which one of these would you say is longer? And the first person says, well, the bottom one. Well, clearly the bottom one is shorter than, and so when you're watching the test subject, they're like, what? Number 2, the bottom one. And as they go around the list, around the room, everybody is saying the bottom string is longer, even though the top string is longer. By the time they get to the 20th person, it's in the 80 percentile, 80%, something like that, of the people, 8, maybe even higher, of the tests. There's only one test subject. All the rest of these people are lying. But by the time you get to this last person, it's in the 80% of the people who will say, well, the bottom string is longer. In other words, they will openly contradict what their own eyes are clearly telling them. And what's especially interesting is that if you do that with 19 people and you ask the 20th, like I said, it's something like 80-something% of the people will deny the evidence of their own eyes, either because they want to get along, they don't want to be seen to stand out, or sometimes they probably think, I must be crazy. Everybody else is answering. Obviously something wrong with me. What's especially interesting to me from a social defense kind of an angle against this media onslaught of social proof that we'll get into in a minute, is the fact that if one person out of the other 19 says the correct answer, then the number on that test subject drops from 85% down to 25 or 30. This is the Emperor's New Clothes example, and I know I've said it before. I'm just going to say it again because some people haven't heard it before. Everybody knows the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. These two merchants come into town and convince this emperor that they've got this special cloth, and the cloth is miraculously woven in such a way that the only people that can't see how beautiful it is are either the very dumb, the very vain, or the very evil. And so they make this big show of opening this chest, and they make this big show of presenting this fabric, and the emperor's not a terribly bright guy. It's mostly just the emperor. And they said, what do you think of it, Your Majesty? And now this guy is convinced, because both of these guys are convincing him that there's a beautiful fabric. Here's what the emperor says, oh, it's incredible. I've never seen such amazing colors. And these two con artists say, well, sir, if you'd like, we can go and make you a suit of this. It's going to be expensive because of the quality of the fabric. And, oh, no, I absolutely insist. So they go off and make this suit of the emperor's new clothes, and it's made out of this material that only the virtuous and the intelligent can see. And so they present it to him, and he pretends to get dressed in it, and they pretend to fasten it up. And everybody around him in the court of the emperor goes, oh, unbelievable. Because nobody, not only does nobody want to be, because everybody knows the story, but the important part is coming up. Nobody wants to be the person who says they don't see it, because number one, they're afraid that what these merchants said is true, is that I must be incredibly stupid not to see it. And nobody wants to stand out if they have their own internal convictions. He's not wearing any clothes, but I'm not going to say anything because he's the emperor. So the emperor goes on this giant parade, and everybody in the entire town is applauding, and they're all this hosannas and all the rest of the stuff. And then finally at the end, there's a little boy, and the little boy says, he's not wearing any clothes, he's naked. And the second this boy says this, the spell is broken and everybody breaks down and laughs. And the merchants, by the way, are well on their way to the next town with a big, 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 big chest full of money. So I bring this up because of the mechanism. Okay, it's important to understand the mechanism. The mechanism is that none of the people in the parade, no one sees the clothes. But the reason they say they do see the clothes is because every single other one of these hundreds or thousands of people are saying, I do see the clothes. And so they're convinced there's something wrong with them. And so they say, well, I see the clothes. And so they're making their decision based on all the social proof that's coming this way. But the important part of the mechanism is that they then send out social proof to everybody else. That's how it works. And these kind of outbreaks of social psychosis are just perfect examples of this, of the power of social proof throughout history. There was a period when a tulip bulb was commanding the equivalent of hundreds of millions of US dollars. There was just a craze for these tulip bulbs, and everybody had to have one. They had no inherent value. Some were more rare than others, but it became popular delusion and the madness of crowds. So everybody went and bought these things for hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just insane. And then suddenly it's like, it's not really that important. And then everybody's out of their money. So I just looked up and saw a comment from Cafficinato said, which is why questioning the election is forbidden. Precisely correct. Which is why they put you out of bounds, which is why people like Ben Shapiro and back in the day Milo Yiannopoulos and Mike Knowles, this is why they have to shut them down and not allow them to speak, because they're the boys saying they're not wearing any clothes. And once somebody breaks the spell, then they've got a problem. We'll get to the Kamala Harris thing in a minute. But right now for social media, what the dynamic appears to be is that this feminist drive that started really in the 70s and in the beginning of the 70s was a legitimate cause. It's like when I was a little kid growing up, women could be nurses or they could be school teachers and then flight attendants. That's pretty much it. So obviously this liberation of the women into the workforce has been good as a choice, but because feminism didn't want it to be a choice, they wanted it to be mandatory. You're at the point where, and we're past this point now, we're past peak feminism and we're past peak woke, got to the point where you couldn't be a stay-home mom. It's one thing to say, I would like to do something with my life other than be a teacher, a nurse, or a flight attendant. I'm in favor of that. Every reasonable person is in favor of letting everybody do what they want to with their lives. But it got to the point where if you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, there was something wrong with you. It's at the point now where it wasn't even a question of access to abortion. Now you have to not only be pro-abortion, you have to celebrate abortion out loud, or else you're not really a woman as far as the progressives are concerned. So back to the social proof and social media. Social media allows the power of social proof to go from the 4 or 5 friends that you have to the 4,000 or 5,000 followers that you have, and everybody is praying for that lightning in the bottle that can go viral, where hundreds of thousands of people, or maybe even millions of people, are giving you the dopamine hit of agreeing with you. And so what you find is, just to take one example, there was this woman who went out on this date. She said she really liked this guy. She was really overweight. And after the second or third date, the guy said, I'm a little concerned about your health. Basically, he's being as nice as he can to say, you're too heavy. And she was crying and she was upset. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and she wasn't terribly attractive. And so she gets on there and cries about this. And the dynamic that's interesting is not that she feels compelled to share this with the entire world, because TikTok, almost exclusively for women, has become like an open source diary. It's like, here are my most personal thoughts. Let me put them out there so that I can get the dopamine hit, which is this. In the case of this woman, this guy who she liked, and apparently liked her because they went out on a number of dates, was concerned about her weight, either because he was genuinely concerned about her health, or more likely, since it was a relatively short relationship, he was trying to see if he could get her to lose some weight, because I guess he kind of dug her a little bit, and and she was significantly overweight. But here's the dynamic. Here's the poison dynamic. When this woman comes on and says, I'm just so heartbroken. He asked me, he was concerned about my health and act if I was getting enough activity. The comments, there's like 4,000. One comment was like 4,000 times, and it basically said, you are absolutely beautiful. Don't let this man tear down your self-image. You are an absolutely gorgeous woman, and you're lucky to be without him, and he's going to regret it. And so this woman, instead of losing weight, now gets 4,000 likes on one comment that says, not only do you not have to do anything, and not only was he wrong, but you're absolutely stunning. You're absolutely stunning. When you see these women on like the whatever podcast or whenever they're being interviewed in the street, and guys will come up to these women and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? 10. Absolutely a 10. I'm a 10. Well, they're all 10s. You ask any of them, they're all 10s. And sometimes somebody would say, well, what about, Beyonce or, Rihanna? I mean, what are they? Well, they're 10s. And you really think you're in the same league as them? Yeah. Now, Kevin Samuelson used to say, well, if you're a 10, how much modeling have you done? Well, I haven't done any modeling. Well, here's the thing about a 10. You can't walk down the street and be a 10 without somebody approaching you and asking you if you want to be a model or something. That's what happens to 10s. When you got a 10, you can have a person who wants to keep to themselves, and people will hound you into modeling because they know they can make money off of you because you're a 10. And so these women have come to believe not only that they're 10s, but that they don't need any improvement. They certainly have no education. Most of them are covered in tattoos, and their body count, which is the number of guys that they've slept with, is, by the time you're 23, 24 for these young women, it's usually 50 or more. So what ended up happening over the course of the last 4 or 5 years especially is young women especially, but many women got to believe that believe this thing that they're a goddess. Because if there's enough social proof saying you're a goddess, and not only do you not have any defects, but you certainly don't have to do any work on it. He's lucky just to have you. The man that commented on your weight, who did it about as kindly as he could, by the way. He's a loser and probably an incel, and he doesn't know your true worth and so on. So what happens is, you get these mostly the older women's a different story, but with the 20-year-old women, you get these women who are 100% convinced that they are God's gift to earth, and that they're all stunningly beautiful. And when you ask them about, when you ask them the explosive question, the question that causes Chernobyl reaction, well, what do you bring to the table? Their answer is essentially, look at me. I mean, look how beautiful and sexy I am. And then they'll start showing you their Snapchats and all of their videos of them in bikinis and all the rest of it. And men have gotten to the point where they're like, we're just not interested. We're just not interested. I want to get on something like whatever podcast. Not that they haven't had, because if you're not familiar with it, the podcast usually consists of 9 or 10, Gen Z women, and then some guy who's designed to be there to basically, try and wake them up a little bit. I'd like to get on there and just say, listen, here's some things that you might want to think about, ladies. I've been to a large number of top-level celebrity events. I've been to a lot of them, where I have been mingling with major movie stars. And let me clue you in on a few things. None of the women that I have ever seen there, ever once, had a visible tattoo. Not that I'm aware of. I cannot recall a single case of a woman at a top level party, the kind of thing that they want to go to with the kind of men that they want to attract. High value man. I've never, ever seen a high value man with a woman that's got a visible tattoo. Ever. And the more tattoos you have, the more likely it is that these guys are not going to be the top guys, not going to have the slightest interest in you, because they're going to know if you got a tattoo across your chest like this, you're doing this for attention, and you're not doing it for yourself. So if you're putting these tattoos all over yourself, you're doing it to draw attention to yourself. And I'm not interested in the kind of girl that basically does nothing but pose, pictures of herself in a towel from, who's basically turned her body into an advertising billboard for herself. They're just not interested. And the second thing I'd like to tell these women is, obviously some of them are cute enough for what one of these guys calls on these men going their own way channels calls bedroom fun. So we'll just call it bedroom fun or smashing, that kind of thing. The thing that these young women don't seem to understand, because they're all on these dating apps, they swipe right every 100 guys. So all these young women are pursuing a handful of the most attractive guys. These most attractive guys know that they've got 50 women lined up at any given time. So they stand up these women and they just use them, like rental cars. And then these women are crying that they can't get a relationship. And the thing I wanted to say on something like this is to say to them is, listen, you can be an actual 10. None of you here are, and nobody at the table is better than a 7 that I can see. But put that aside for a minute. If you think that the kind of man that you want to attract is only interested in sex all the time, because that seems to be all that you've got to offer. You're all falling out of your clothes here, and you've all got the lip filler, and you've got the all the makeup and all that stuff. So you're basically saying your entire value, the reason that people would pursue you and want to marry you, is because of your sexual appeal. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that you really did have genuine physical sexual appeal. No man of quality is going to be interested in you, because the amount of time you spend having sex, even in the early days of a relationship, is insignificant compared to the amount of time that you're actually talking. And nobody wants to talk to you because, number one, you have no education whatsoever. You can't name 5 countries in the world. Do you actually believe that somebody who's making 6 figures, 7 figures income is going to take you to a party and have somebody come up to you and ask you, what's your favorite country in Europe? Of all the countries in Europe you've been to, what was your favorite? Just small talk. Do you actually believe that men are going to take you to a party where you're going to say, Europe, what's that? It's insane. It's insane. But they've all had that dynamic that I talked about a minute ago with that heavy girl, where they all tell each other on TikTok and other social media platforms, these women constantly tell each other that you're a goddess the way you are, and that your Prince Charming is going to come, and all you have to do is hang on. He's out there. He's going to appear. And then you end up with the women who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, who were in a 20-year marriage, and because of the social media proof, had a number of women telling him, you should leave him. He's not giving you what you want. You're unhappy, you're miserable, you're bored. You should leave him. You'll have all of these options and so on. So they do. They divorce these guys that get bored. 80% of the divorces in America now are coming from women. 90% if you're college educated. They just say, oh, screw it. I'm not 100% happy. I'm bored. And so basically they leave their marriage. Then they go out into the dating market in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And they find that the high value men want nothing to do with them. The guys that have been working on their careers since they were 20, who've been turned down by women who were 20. Now, all of a sudden, they're in their 30s and 40s. These guys have been working their tails off. Now they're successful, and they've grown into their looks, and they went to the gym and all the rest of it. And all the women that spent their 20s just sleeping around and having fun now want one of these guys to come in and marry them and pay all their bills and take care of their 2 kids from some other guy. And they're astonished. They're genuinely astonished that no one's doing this. So this phenomenon is called MGTOW, men going their own way. Because there's nothing in it for men. One of the things that these guys mention continuously, and it's true, is that you could step up and marry a single mom. I did, but it's not a LA single mom. I would dated a few of those, and there's no chance in the world that I would take that kind of risk. They basically say, for guys, there's a zero-win situation here, First of all, your entire appeal is based on your open sexuality, which means you've slept around, which means I'm not interested. And obviously a lot of studies, it's not hard to figure out, show that the more promiscuous you are prior to getting married, the more likely you are to get divorced, because you've slept with 50 guys, and this one guy was this incredible lover, and this other guy was brilliant, and this other guy was funny, and this other guy was this, and so you spend your life waiting for the guy who's all of these things together, and that doesn't exist. Can't exist. And this social proof is destroying the society. It's tearing it down. And the women are going nuts. That's why there's a Karen phenomenon, is because these women are not only single, but they cannot handle the stress of it. They can't handle being alone. They're not built to be alone. And men are built to be alone. It's not that men don't desire female company, and it's certainly not that they don't desire the sexual gratification of it. But men obviously are looking for somebody they can invest their time and their resources in, and these idiot girls and these women with 3 children from 3 different fathers just make them feel like suckers. And all of this social proof is coming from social media, primarily TikTok, but also all the others. So Eric says, so in the chat section says, so what should women bring to the table? Well, I'm going to agree with what the general prevailing consensus is. Nowadays, if you ask men nowadays, obviously beauty is important to men, and obviously attractiveness and sexual attractiveness is important to men. But what men are really looking for is femininity, somebody who's pleasant to be around, someone who appreciates what you do, somebody who doesn't treat you like a bicycle and she's the fish. Somebody who makes your home a refuge from the world instead of some place that you will hang out and drink until 11 o'clock so you don't have to go home. Yeah, exactly. Aussie drone guy says virtue. Precisely correct. That's exactly the word. They're looking for virtue. They're looking for relative chastity. They're looking for a kind of meekness. It's not that they have to go yes master to everything that they say, because nobody wants a doormat. But so many of these women rather, modern women are so masculine. They get on YouTube and all they do is shriek and screech and lecture and hector. What's the matter with you men? Why is it? It's like am I in an HR meeting? It's like, well, I don't understand why men are leaving. I don't effing get it. I spend effing hours on my effing makeup every single day, and I go out there and I look effing gorgeous, and it's like, you lost me at effing. Hard pass. I'm done. You lost me. Yeah. Mobile Moto says wisdom, comfort, peace, these kind of things. And he also Barking Spiders 1959 says, Bill, you got a unicorn in Natasha, beauty and grace. I did, but it's not lost on me that was an import. That wasn't a domestic product. That was imported because they're not crazy over there. So men going their own way, basically, the term now is passport bros. So these young men are realizing, I'll just I'll just go to, Thailand, or I'll go to Vietnam, or even, it's not quite as much as it used to be, but Ukraine, Russia, women who grew up to be feminine and who are not expecting, the sixes, the six pack, the six figure income, and 6 feet tall and older. Anyway, the point of all this is that the not only is the population cratering, that's a big deal, but the bonds that hold people together and families together and friendships together are being severed by this machine that gives you the illusion of being connected to a large number of people when in fact you're not being connected to a large number of people at all. Those 4,000 people that said, no, you're absolutely stunning, to the fat girl, you're absolutely stunning the way you are, your prince is going to come along, don't you worry, just stay the way you are, you're a knockout. Okay, so what happens? So nobody dates that girl. And I think probably the most pernicious part of it all is that both young women and older women now, from what I'm seeing from these TikTok videos, are sitting around waiting for their Prince Charming, that the guy is going to come and he's going to be 6 foot tall, he's going to have 6-pack abs, and he's going to make 6 figures, and he's going to swoop into your life and marry you and take care of the 2 kids that you had with the baby daddy who's not there anymore because either you walked out on the marriage or he walked out on you. And now it's his job to raise your kids. This is the thing that women don't seem to understand on any age level. They just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to understand that your kids are always your kids. They will always be your kids. But a man is like, these are not my children. So anyway, it's gotten really, really, really toxic, and I have to say. That there's something satisfying about watching this phenomenon, because what the men are basically saying is, hey, listen, you told us you don't want to be approached, you told us you need men like a fish needs a bicycle. They did a famous series of on the street interviews with young women and said, would you rather be walking through the woods with a man or a bear? And they said, this is a serious question, it's not a joke. And most of them said the bear. And so, the whole forces female, girl boss, strong and independent, all of this stuff, they've all been programmed to believe it. And they think, because they've been programmed to believe this, they think that men are interested in the fact that, well, I own my own house and I make $160,000 a year and I have a Mercedes Benz. These are what the women are putting out there as what makes them attractive, and the men are saying, we don't care about any of that stuff. We really don't care. It's like I have no interest in this at all, none. I would trade the $160,000 a year, which is really your money. We know how this works. I would trade it for a pleasant personality, and I'd consider it a real bargain. And so women are now in a state of panic. Young women are not getting approached, and older women are not getting approached because when they say we want guys to approach us, what they really mean is we want the chads to approach us. If some guy on the aisle is I've seen a number of women who say they just hang around at Home Depot all day making eyes at people and waiting for somebody to make a pass at them. And they say approach them. When I was a kid, we'd say make a pass, because that's a much better term for it. That's exactly what we mean. It's not approach me. Approach me means, excuse me, ma'am, do you know where I can find the LED light fixtures? That's an approaching somebody. Making a pass on somebody is making a pass. I just am against euphemistic language, and I think making a pass is a perfectly honorable thing to do if you're a single guy. And that's what they want. They want men to make a pass at them, but they don't want men to make a pass at them if they're not attracted to them, because if they do, especially at work, next thing you know, HR is involved. The next thing you know, this guy's either fired or disciplined or reprimanded. In some cases, the woman is going to testify that he made unwanted sexual advances, may find himself in jail or with on the sex offender registry. And all of this is driven by the dopamine hit that people get. All people get this. I get it from positive comments, and this thing is rigged to give positive comments for negative behavior. And it's creating a society where this feminine ideology has become so toxic and so entitled that men are going their own way. They're basically saying, you know what, I'm not interested. I'll have a couple of numbers and I'll have my fun, and then I'll hang out with my guys and we'll play video games and we'll watch football, and I don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And it's real. And it's TikTok in China links to mathematics classes and nature documentaries. Here, it's designed to link to the most entitled and destructive entries. And that's what it does, is it broadcasts all of those things wide. So it tells women who are in a marriage that you shouldn't be bored, that you should have all of the romance you had when you started dating, and there's just a line of men out there waiting to just fall down at the feet of a queen like you. But the most destructive thing is, and I think this is really it, is, and I'm not seeing this so much from men, but I see it from virtually all of the women. And basically, what I'm seeing is this idea that the perfect man is going to come into their lives. And many, many modern women, older women and younger women both, have an actual list that they wrote down. These are my minimum requirements. He must have these qualities. He must make at least this much money. He must be at least this tall. He must be this. He must be that. They've got a list. And some of them have a list that runs 3 pages of all of the boxes that you have to check before she's going to take you seriously, because she's decided this is what she's worth and this is what she wants. And so everybody will be waiting not only for a guy that's not coming for them, but for a guy that doesn't exist. One thing I learned about being married is there is no perfect partner. There is no Prince Charming. There is no soulmate. It's not, this idea of a soulmate is look, I believed in it for 25, 30 years. I deeply love the woman I'm married, but that relationship is something that gets built over time. And when you come through hardships, you feel better on the other side of it. And this belief that this perfect person is out there, not only is he not going to scoop you up, he doesn't exist. You're taking the best qualities of 10 people you've met, and none of the people in the world have all of the best qualities in one place. So it's made these women, especially the young women, into these entitled, unbearably obnoxious, extremely masculine, dumb as a box of hammers potatoes that are absolutely convinced that the world revolves around them, and it's starting to dawn on them that this isn't happening, and they're freaking out, which is good. It's good that they're freaking out, and I'm happy that they're panicking, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take, the term that's used in a lot of these videos is women hit the wall, where they're 40 years old and they think they can get the same kind of attention they got when they were 20. They especially think if they fooled around a lot and slept around a lot in their 20s and 30s, that some guys, now they're going to find a good man who's going to take care of them and raise their kids as his own. And then, that's assuming she doesn't get bored with the marriage and, just leave. Cold, they call that hitting the wall. And cold, hard reality is really starting to land. But the biggest, as I said, the most pernicious aspect of this whole thing, and there's a lot about this that's just plain wrong, is this belief that there's this perfect guy for you, and it doesn't exist. And there's no perfect girl for you either, because there are no perfect people. Perfect people don't exist. Many people on these videos are making the argument that, how do I get a perfect person? How do I land a perfect person? What do I have to do to get the perfect man or the perfect woman? And nobody's really coming out and saying the truth, which is there is no perfect person. It's all a compromise. The entire idea of marriage is a compromise. You have to give things up, and you get things. And my experience has been what I get is worth much more than what I gave, but you still give things up. And this sense of perfection is so disconnected from reality that it's a result of social media, and specifically TikTok, which almost, as I said, it's almost exclusively women who set these cameras up and then either confess how they're feeling awful, or they're angry because they got stood up on a date, or they're just angry, or they're crying because they're single, or whatever. But they're saying things that they should be saying to their best friend or their diary, and they're saying it in front of thousands of people, because the diary that women used to keep, when they wrote, "I feel ugly and fat," the diary didn't come back and say, "No, you are a stunning and brave, beautiful, strong boss girl, and any man on this planet would be lucky to have you. All you have to do is stick to your standards and wait, he'll be here any day now." Which reminds me of a true story, actually. I was probably in my early 20s, and I did not have much confidence, like most guys I knew in my early 20s. Just the guys who used to hang out with me, kind of the dorks. And I was, just old enough to start be able to go to clubs and stuff. And I went with, I've told the story before, I just love it. It's true. And four of us went to this, I grew up in Miami. I grew up in Miami in the 80s, so it was the place to be in the world. We went into this club, and we sat at this table. We're getting drinks, and there was dancing there. It was just a Miami nightclub. And there was this one woman in a white dress, and as I remember it couldn't have been quite this dramatic, but as I remember it was like a dark room with a pin spot, and she was sitting at a table by herself. Just by herself. Not looking around waiting for somebody, just sitting there being gorgeous. Really, really, really gorgeous. And you would watch these guys take the walk, to do what men used to do, which is, and what women are saying, "Why aren't you doing this anymore? Why aren't you approaching us?" Well, the rejection's always been there. That's always been part of it. You either man up and be prepared to get shot down, or you don't get shot down. Now, if they made a pass on her in the bar, she'd call security, and the guy'd be escorted out of the building. But she was sitting there, and I watched probably 5 or 6 guys walk up to her and just kind of lean in and talk for a little bit, and they're asking her if they want to dance, and she would just, "No, I don't think so." And then they take the walk of shame back to their table. And there was a guy who was with us who I didn't know at all. I mean, I don't know if I'd met him once before or something, but he certainly wasn't a close friend. And we were all just kind of watching this. And I'm not taking that walk. There's no chance I'm taking that walk. I didn't have that kind of game at all. Although today I'd probably look at it differently if I wasn't married. In any event, this guy who was at the table just watched 4 or 5 of these guys get shot down. And he was just getting angrier and angrier. And finally, after the next guy, the last guy, he just said, "God damn it," and he just pushed his chair back and he got up. And he started walking over to this girl. And you could see he just asked her something, and she went, "No, I'm sorry." And then he started talking to her. And her entire demeanor just completely changed. Just completely changed. And he sat down and chatted with her for 10 minutes or something. And then they left together, and he's coming back to say goodbye to us. I said, "What the hell did you say to this girl?" I really was genuinely curious, genuinely wanted to know, because it was magic. It was magic. I said, "Do you want to dance?" She said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't want to." And this guy said, and then I said, "Well, listen, princess, Prince Charming's horse threw a shoe on the way over here, so he's not coming tonight. Now you can sit here all night and shoot guys down for your own fun if you want to, but if you want to actually be a real person and have a nice time, why don't you get up and we'll dance like we're supposed to?" Something along those lines. And I was just so impressed by that listen, Prince Charming's horse threw a shoe on the way over here, and he's not coming. And I thought, my God, but this doesn't happen anymore. It's not a question of, it's like you swipe right or you swipe left. And all the guys swipe right. For those of you who are older, who haven't used a dating app, you get a face. I'm not talking about Match.com or a dating site, although there's plenty of this there too. Dating app like Tinder, a face comes up, and if you like the person, you swipe right. If you don't, you swipe them to the left. And these have become terms that are interchangeable now. Do you like something? Yeah, swipe right on that. And so what will happen is the men will get on this thing, and most of the time they'll think the girl is attractive enough, so they'll swipe right. The women, on the other hand, are going left. When they see somebody, because all you get to see is, you don't get their personality, you don't get to know anything about what their morals are, or whether they're funny or whether they're smart. It's 100% appearance. This is how people meet each other now. It's 100% appearance. And so they'll see guys that are attractive, and they'll swipe right on those guys. And when two people swipe right, then the app matches them up and puts them in touch with each other, and then they can, DM each other, direct message each other. Again, we got people who remember what a rotary phone was and how to use it. So what happens? So now these two people have connected. 97% of the men get nothing or next to nothing, because the women are only going for the guys that look good. You could have a perfect husband, the guy you claim you want, but you don't have a chance to find out if he's funny. You don't have a chance to find out if he's confident. The thing about that guy who was so successful, I don't remember his name even, it wasn't so much what he said. And it wasn't so much that he had the confidence to take the walk, because 5 or 6 guys had the confidence to take the walk. But he had the confidence to not take an easy no. There are guys that are so thick that, like, leave me alone. I'm going to call the police. We're not talking about that. She was there to brush guys off. And in retrospect, at the time, I thought she was just really enjoying humiliating these guys. I thought she was just there just for her own ego. But looking back on it now, I realized, no, she was waiting for a guy who had the confidence to go past the no. Go past the no. I got a bunch of super chats here, but I'll stay with it. And that's what she's looking for. She's looking for somebody who doesn't take the no. And so the second she said no, and he basically turned her attitude back on her, it was like unlocking a door. It's like, oh, okay, let's go. Now, none of that is on the table. It's a question. And by the way, most of the pictures there are, I almost said photoshopped, but basically there are just filters. It's a plug-in. You look into the camera, and it takes away all your imperfections, and it makes your lips fuller and does all these other things. And those are the pictures they post. So when you meet the person, you don't even get the person you thought you were getting it's all just completely illusory. It's none of it's real. Nothing is real. And since there's no connection other than the physical attraction because we both swiped right, then the date becomes, this is what women are complaining about, and rightfully so, if it weren't for the toxic femininity, or womanism, I've heard is a term that I like a lot. And so what happens is the guy will basically just say, what you doing? Nothing. Want to come over? Sure. So, they're smashing on the first date, and there usually isn't a second date. Now, 1 or 2 of these women would talk about how my mom, this story I heard verbatim, woman talking about, why aren't men approaching anymore? Why aren't men approaching us? Well, because we don't want to go to jail. And when you said you're strong and independent and brave and you don't need no men, we listened. And when you said men and masculinity is toxic, we heard you. And when you said women need men like a fish needs a bicycle, then have fun swimming around. I'll just be over here with the other bicycles. You've got nothing to offer me. You're just an angry, aggressive, mean, masculine pain in the ass. So society is basically, kind of falling apart. And this woman, a number of women, but one sticks very clearly in my mind, said, my dad met my mom and asked her out, and she said no. And he wouldn't give up. He just really wanted to be with her so much that he just kept trying. And after the third or fourth attempt, she agreed. Now, again, I've gotten wiser as I got older. I used to think that he wore her down, but what I realized was, no, he actually, like a salmon swimming upstream, he actually passed a test, And so they end up going out and they get married. And she says, well, why aren't men doing that with me? And most of these guys who are making these videos are basically saying, well, because he was a traditional man, and you want a traditional man, but you're not a traditional woman, because traditional women don't make TikTok videos about anything. They don't put their personal lives out in front of there for thousands of people, and most traditional women haven't slept with 30 guys by the time they're 21. So don't be surprised. You were sold this bill of goods. You were sold, you can have all the benefits of being a man, and you can be as promiscuous as you want to, and you go girl, and we're going out for a girls' weekend, or the girls are going to Fort Lauderdale for the weekend, and they're going to whore around, and that after having slept with 60 guys or 100 guys by the time they're 30, when they're ready to settle down, then this man who's been working his ass off their entire life is going to just swoop in and ignore all of that and just take them away. Not going to happen. Sometimes you'll hear women say, I've seen lots of high-value men with women that are not attractive at all. And I just want to start screaming, no, they're not pretty. They're extremely attractive. And the reason that this man is with this woman is because they got together when he had nothing. He had nothing. And she believed in him. And they built it together. She supported him, and it used to be common sometimes. You would still. I remember stories of guys who either want to start their own business or they were looking for a higher level education degree, and he marries his high school sweetheart, and she takes a second job to help pay the bills while he's learning how to become an engineer, something like that, and they build it. But the reason that guy in the story within this story, the reason he pursued this woman and got turned down 3 times before she went out with him was because he had spent enough time with her in class or something to have enough physical time in her presence to realize there's something about this woman that I just have to have. She's either more interesting, more funny. It's not that she was prettier. It's just there was something about her, that there was a quality. He just said, this is what I want. And he just didn't give up. So, so over here, Battlesmurf says Pierce Brosnan is a great example. Yeah, there's a few guys who are still married to their original wives. And the reason they are is because Mrs. Brosnan was with Pierce Brosnan before he was Pierce Brosnan. And that's how it goes. And I've seen, and I'll get off this subject, but one of the most, I don't know, it's frustrating, and there's also a amount of Schadenfreude involved, is when you see women who are furious and they're screaming into the camera, and they're going, I don't effing understand why these effing men won't effing stand up to me. I don't want to be a boss babe. I want to be an effing housewife. I want to be an effing housewife, and I want to be effing taken care of. And I want somebody to pay my effing bills, and I want to be around and raise my effing children. I don't know where my effing husband is, and I'm thinking, lady, like I said, you lost me on the first effing. You lost me on the TikTok video. You lost me. Just the fact that you're putting this out there. Not interested. Hard pass. So now it's getting to be for men. It was always for men, a buyer's market, and the women were doing the selling. Now it's starting to invert itself, because what these women don't realize is, like everything else with the left, it's an inversion of reality. And this entire dynamic that I'm talking about is an inversion of reality because it's an inversion of biology. Now, I'm not a biologist, but biology does exist, and there are differences between men and women. Men desire the company of women, but women need men because that's all they talk about. When you look at men's magazines, think about a men's magazine. What does it consist of? Gym, field and stream, fishing, hunting, any number of interests. Women's magazines are about how to get men. And it's catastrophic. And it's being, I would say 80% of this is not just social media. I'd say 80% of it is TikTok. TikTok and dating apps. They're destroying society. I mean, they're not just keeping people from meeting each other. They're not just destroying the bonds between men and women. They're creating an environment where the bonds cannot form under any circumstances. They are basically turning off the receptors. You know, the women are angry, the men are fed up. And I coined this term 10 years ago, and I met my wife 8 years ago. But before then, people say, what's it like dating in LA? And it's like, well, the men are weak and the women are crazy. And the weak men make the women crazy. And the crazy women make the men weak. And in the intervening time, the men have just said, okay, you said all these things. You want to be a boss babe and you want to be strong and independent. Knock yourself out. You're strong and independent. What are you crying about? That's ideology trumping biology. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. In my opinion, this is clearly, I think, the conservative position, but I'm talking biologically now. I'm talking about how our brains are wired, how our emotions are set up. In my opinion, it's not a question of like the two-parent household. In my opinion, based on the person I married and on the people who I dated before I got married, the situation that seems to work best for the biology of men's brains and women's brains is that the men will worry about everything if the woman worries about the man. If the woman takes care of the man will take care of everything else. That seems to me to be the best, the most stable and the most satisfying arrangement for everybody. I don't think most women really, a 40-hour or a 50-hour or 60-hour a week job used to be the purview of men only. And I said this at the beginning, I'll say it at the end. I'm not saying that women should be forced to be housewives or nurses or teachers or flight attendants. But I am saying that the so-called pay gap, the 72 cents on the dollar thing, it's ridiculous on its face. I mean, people say, well, if I could just hire women and save 25 cents on the dollar, then I just hire nothing but women. But it's actually much simpler than that. It's illegal to pay somebody less money because they're women. It has been illegal since ever. So the reason men make more money than women per capita is because men work longer hours. And men can work longer hours because they don't need the level of emotional engagement that women need. And so men go out into the world the way they used to go out and hunt, and the women basically stay by the campfire. And you may think that, well, geez, women don't get any sense of adventure that way. True. But when the saber-toothed tiger comes into the cave, we all know who's supposed to go running, and we all know who's supposed to be cowering in the back of the cave. We know who's supposed to go to the front of the cave with the spear, and the same thing is true when those people from the mountains come down on their horses. They're professional warriors who train their whole lives with swords and lances, and I've got a pitchfork, and my job is to go out there and slow these guys down enough so that my wife and kids can make it to the woods and have a chance. That's not factored in. Bill Burr basically, I mean, he basically took the pay gap for granted, and he said, just consider it a tax. It's I get $1 an hour extra because if we're on board a cruise ship and the cruise ship sinks, you get to go into a lifeboat and I have to stand here and ride it down to the bottom. And so it comes back to a statement that I've been making for years now, and I was using it to apply to video games, but you can't beat the biology out of people. Young men are told that they're defective girls, basically. How come you were looking out the window? How come you don't share? How come you're so competitive? How come you're so independent? How come you're so all of these men things. So you're fidgeting. You're in a room. Just sit down, be quiet. And you're just like a defective girl now in school. and all the boss babes on the movies, and watching, Natalie Portman beat up, Andre the Giant, and it's like it's complete fiction. It's not connected to anything. It's absolute plain fantasy on the part of a few very angry women and very weak men. But boys are considered to be like defective girls now, and there's not a video game that I've seen that has come out that did not have a female warrior as the protagonist. And I mean, not one. And this latest Aliens movie, Romulus, it's a woman on board the ship who's forced to pick up a gun and basically deal with the alien, which worked with Ripley because on the first Alien movie, Ripley was as scared as everybody else. And Ripley was just trying to get the hell out of there. And when she went back in Aliens with the flamethrower, she didn't do it to go down there and kick some ass so that you could show the men how it's done. She did it because Hicks was incapacitated, because if Hicks hadn't been incapacitated, Hicks would have gone down to get the girl. And that's why that movie works, because she's going down there, it's her maternal instincts, and she's going to fight this alien queen because of Newt. She's not doing it just because somebody needs their ass kicked. She's doing it because of Newt. It works perfectly. Now Ripley would be there and basically be an entire platoon of Marines, and she'd say, somebody has to go clear this nest out. What's the matter with you bunch of wimps? All right, I'll go do it myself, And then the men would bump into things and apologize and cower. Okay. Your political philosophy, progressives, does not line up with biology, and you can apply all the social proof you want to, but you will not prevail in the end. You will ruin things, but you will not prevail in the end. And politics is downstream of culture, as my friend Andrew Breitbart used to say. And even the pop culture now understands that they cannot win with wokeness. And companies are beginning to realize it too. We've talked about how could Bud Light make a decision like that. Well, I mentioned this, I think, last show, but very briefly, the executives at Bud Light are not connected to the pop culture. They look at the demographics, and somebody comes in, marketing consultants come in, people who make a living trying to get money out of corporations, telling them what they want to hear. And so basically these young marketing executives or marketing companies would come in and say to the CEO and the board of Bud Light, they'd say, listen, your consumers are getting older. Your average age of Bud Light drinkers is getting older. And if you don't start appealing to a younger audience, then you're going to lose your market. Well, what does the younger audience want? Well, the younger audience is really deep into transgendered people. Okay, if you say so, you're the expert. And so it's not just Bud Light. Was it Harbor Freight or some tractor company and all of these, the NFL? What was the razor? Was it Gillette? They get told that this is what young people want, and then what they end up doing is they don't get any new customers. They just destroy their base that got them where they are in the first place. Same exact thing with Star Wars. Gillette and Star Wars, the exact same thing. Gillette used to make ads that appealed to men, manly men who were shaving. And Old Spice was brilliant with those commercials that were just out of the park. They were great. So Gillette is convinced that young men who are going to need to be using their razors buy this whole toxic masculinity thing, and they make an ad that basically says, we have to be better men. And the men who've been using Gillette their whole lives say, F you. You know what? I don't need a company lecturing me. I've been supporting my family for the last 35 years. I don't need you telling me I need to be a better man. I think I'll use Jeremy's razors. And so they destroy their base. That's what happened with Bud Light. I have heard now, I can't imagine how this could be possible, but at the same time, I suppose it is. I've seen in two places that Dylan Mulvaney ad, which wasn't even a major ad, cost the company, Anheuser-Busch company, cost them $27 billion of lost revenue and potential lost revenue. Bud Light went from being the number one beer brand in the country to third or fourth now. Apparently Harley-Davidson has done it. Okay. Hollywood is beginning to realize now that having listened to these people and agreeing with them because of the social proof, right? All of these executives go to the same party as all the rest of these elitists, and they all tell themselves that the masses need to have this and the masses need to do that, and so on and so on and so on. Tractor Supply. Yeah. And so they're all in this gigantic parade of people, all of whom are saying, wow, the emperor's clothes look absolutely fantastic to each other, no matter what they think themselves, and society's falling apart. Let me rephrase that. Non-conservative society is falling apart. We are self-selected. People watching the show are self-selected. We are immune to social proof. If you were not immune to social proof, you wouldn't be listening now. Some people a lot of people have been here for a long time. Some people may be hearing this for the first time or are relatively new, and they're hearing something that sounds like it's true. It's like the boy saying he's not wearing any clothes. It's like, oh, maybe I should listen to what this kid has to say. I'm not saying he's right, but he's got me thinking about things. So anyway, that's my my opening rant, and look at that, we got 182 viewers here. We're going to talk about this social proof and popular delusions of the madness of crowds as it relates to Kamala Harris. So let me just catch up on these super chats because I take these things very seriously. I'll just scroll up to the top of this thing and I'll put on my my recognition spectacles. That's what happens when you get to be a little older. Let's see what we got. I don't want to miss them because I take them very seriously and I appreciate them very much. J-Doc, excuse me, J-Doc. The super chat says, 11 years my wife and I hold on to each other for a dear life, even in fights, just to get a better grip on one another. It's crazy out there. We're lucky. Well said. Good for you. And it's crazy out there is an understatement. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. McGillis. Sorry about that. Getting late here. Hope I'm getting it right. Explain what happened to the Senate. You explained it in a video, but obviously hard to track down. Democrats muddied up the purpose. Yeah, because it's a super chat, I'll just give you the short version of that. The 17th Amendment, prior to the 17th Amendment, one of the progressive amendments that were passed in the early 1920s that utterly destroyed society, the Senate used to be elected by the state legislatures. It was not a general election. You couldn't vote for senator. You could vote for your state legislators, but they would vote for senators. And because the state is picking two men to be senators, those two men, because they were men, were not selected by the people. They were selected by the state, which meant that they went to the Senate not to represent the interests of the people. That's what the House of Representatives is for. They went to represent the power of the states. So there was a body, the Senate, that was there to protect the rights of the states and to keep state power away from the federal government. Once you make senators elected by the popular vote as opposed to being appointed by the legislature, then there's nobody representing the state. The person who can appeal to the most votes, even if it's against the interests of his state, wants to be a senator, so he's going to basically give the party line, or he's going to tell people what they want to hear. And so the Senate becomes just a House of Lords. It's a glorified House of Lords. It doesn't represent the power it's supposed to represent. And so we had a three-level government three ways. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have the legislative branch. But we also have it on three levels. We've got the federal level, the state level, and people level. And the Constitution identifies the federal government, the states, and the people. Those are the only three entities it talks about. And the states have been completely emasculated by this amendment that stopped having senators represent the interests of the state and made them essentially glorified representatives who only have to get elected every 6 years instead of every 2. There is still a benefit to the Senate. Because you have a 6-year term, you are not as susceptible to immediate public pressure. And that was one of the ideas of the Senate too, would be that you want to be able to have a government that is responsive enough to the mood of the people and to changing conditions, so that you can basically, it's hard to believe because of the power of incumbency, but technically speaking, you could flush the entire House every 2 years. You could vote every single one of them out. You could vote every single one of them out. You could have a House of Representatives that consisted of 435 Republicans. People don't split down those lines to that degree, but that tug of war and that middle of the line goes back and forth. But you could have 435 Republicans or 435 Democrats every 2 years. And the Senate gives you a little bit of a longer view, so it still serves a function of keeping some brakes on major changes that can be a result of popular delusions and the madness of crowds, and we're going to get to that in just a second. McGillis again with another super chat says, also Kevin Samuels, I think I said Samuelson earlier, debated these type of entitled women waiting around for men that don't exist for them. Yeah, and Kevin was brutal. He would just say, how would you rate yourself? Out of the shower, no makeup, and you can't use a 7. That was a brilliant thing for him to say. Can't use 7, because everybody would like to give themselves a 7. And the ones that are not giving themselves 10, and a lot of these women gave themselves 10, and he would just burst out laughing in some cases. He just burst out laughing. But yeah, if you had to describe yourself and you were in an optimistic mood, you'd probably say I'm a 7. And then by taking the 7 away, you got to commit to either being an 8, which is probably a bit of a stretch, or a 6, which is kind of better than you hope for. So in any event, he was the godfather. He was sharp image consultant, really, really great guy. I really liked his content a lot. And then he just dropped dead of a heart attack in an airport, which made a lot of people happy because they didn't like hearing the truth about things. And that's what they do. They put their fingers in their ears and off they go. Here's another one from McGillis. I'm too sauced to timestamp, but this episode is funny. You're cooking. Thank you. Yeah, it was something I've been thinking about a lot. McGillis again. Mungo Jerry in the summertime, the song. I remember that song too. Here's a super chat from J-Doc. Just a super chat. Thank you very much. Just a $9.99 super chat. Thanks. And I think I want to make sure to miss that. And it looks like we got one more, and then I can catch up with them as we go. This is from J-Doc again. Used to be an alcoholic, but thanks to Bud Light, I quit. Used to be an alcoholic, but thanks to Bud Light, I quit. Joke, by the way. Well, Dylan Mulvaney may have saved more men from alcoholism than any other single person on the face of the earth. And when I say we're past peak woke, you can tell because we're long past peak Dylan Mulvaney. And here's J-Doc again. Hey, Bill, can you do a 5-minute hot take every day on the days of the last day's news or whatever? It would be bringing in tons of viewers and memberships. I have thought about this many times, and the more I think about it, the better I like it. I really, really feel like that's a way to really build an audience. Because the guys who have real audiences, I've got the best audience, I just don't have the most audience. I clearly have the best audience. I really am giving that serious thought. I mentioned at the very beginning of the show that the first defeating Harris thing wasn't as satisfactory as I wanted it to be because it lived in the zone between. It was scripted, so it wasn't produced well enough to appear scripted, but at the same time it also knocked off the authenticity that you get like we're getting right now. And here's another super chat from TNG Tactical Miata. Tactical Miata, love it. Hi Bill, I almost never catch you live, but know that I watch every one of your shows. Much love, you're one of the best out there. Thank you very much. That means the world to me. It really, really does. Doing hot takes is some of your best stuff. Right Angle feels like stodgy relic of a different age. Yeah, well, Right Angle. The problem with Right Angle is we do it once a week, and so we are almost always behind the news curve. So there's that. But the thing about Right Angle is it's not about the subject; it's about the interaction, in my opinion. That's what makes it work. But based on this observation, I may talk to the guys about finding things that are more interested in sort of an evergreen way, and that produce more interesting dynamics, although it's almost impossible to not talk about the news, so it's it may feel a little old-fashioned. It is. We've been doing it for 15 years now, But we've been doing it for 15 years now. So, it's been our bread and butter, and I believe we're going to keep it more or less the same. But now our members, goodness gracious, J-Doc again for another super chat. Love to hear you on the drive to work every day. Thank you. Now, we have a show for our members that members, even a relatively small number of our members watch. We have a backstage members-only show that gets seen by maybe, 300-400 people a week. And that show is 100% unscripted. The first thing you see is us with the clapboards, putting our clapboards down, and it is a blast because we talk for an hour about everything. Everything. We're talking about Sky. Let me tell you what we covered on our last show. I have to prepare this thing here. Let's see where to go. It's here. Hang on. Give me a second. Everybody just chill. Yeah. So on our backstage show, which we shot on the 13th, we talked about the game Battleship. We talked about Bonhoeffer. We talked about the Ukraine incursion into Kursk. We talked about how humans are immune to EMP, and when we have artificial intelligence, you could be sitting on an EMP device and detonate it, and humans wouldn't feel a thing. So that's kind of nice to have a weapon that affects them and not us. Talked about the Paris Olympics. Talked about Tom Cruise, fear of heights. Skydiving and bungee jumping. Talked about laser tag and paintball, learning Spanish, memory lapses, and the German language. And I need to make one of those public because those are really fun. I really should do that. I'm sure our members wouldn't mind if we do it once or twice, because that's basically our gift to the membership. The entire reason people are members of BillWhittle.com is because they pay so that we get the message out there. And we used to do a members-only topic, but they said, well, these should be out there. But the members-only show is just us, just the three of us. And it's much, much looser than the regular shows because we don't bring topics. On our regular shows, each one of us brings a topic. But on the members-only show, we just sit down and talk about what happened to us on the way to work. And so this daily show thing is really, really starting to appeal to me. And I think probably the smart way to do it would be to do it either twice a week or 3 times a week and see if I can maintain it, and then take it from there. It's a great idea, and I'm very inclined to give it a try. So thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for adding encouragement to that, because that just is cool. Now the question is, yeah, I did it every day. I'm sure I could do it again. I should call it Hot Mic. For those of you who were around for a while, it was about 6 years ago now, I did a show I did a call-in on Grant Stinchfield's show for 3 months, and then they offered me my own show on NRA TV, and they wanted to call it Hot Mic, which I thought sounded fine. And on the first show, I said, "Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle. Hot Mike couldn't be here today. He's got a modeling audition for Calvin Klein underwear, but we expect him back tomorrow." And then I did a Hot Mike joke every day for, I think it was a 3-month run. And in the last week or 10 days of the 3-month run, NRA TV said, "We don't like the Hot Mike joke." And I said, au contraire, people love the Hot Mike joke. The Hot Mike joke is it's like opening credits. And it's hard to come up with one. I never think of them in advance. I'd be sitting down and I've got 60 seconds to showtime, and I think, what the hell is Hot Mike doing this week? It was fun. So maybe I'll call it Hot Mike. They don't own the term Hot Mike. There's a lot of shows called Hot Mike out there, but I miss Hot Mike, because Hot Mike would be getting lip filler, or Hot Mike would be, attending a African dance recital, or Hot Mike would be doing all the things that you'd be doing over there in Hollywood. Hot Mike can't come in today because his hands are cracked from all the pottery classes he took over the weekend. So yeah, I'm inclined to want to do that. Okay, so let's get to the brass tacks here. I've been talking about election betting odds as opposed to polls because polls you can structure any way you want to, and you can select the audience, and you can phrase the question in certain ways, so you can get a result of a private poll. You get pretty much what you want out of that. But election betting odds are people putting up their own money. Seems like, well, certainly a month ago, probably less than that, Donald Trump had a 60-point lead over Joe Biden. 60 points. I'm not happy to break this news to you here. Right now, he's down 10 points to Kamala Harris, who's at 53%, and Trump's down to 44%. Does this mean that's how the election's going to go? No. But Harris was at 2% before. And the reason I spend as much time talking about the social proof is because in order to explain this, let's not forget that Kamala Harris had the lowest approval rating of any vice president in history ever, 28% or something like that. Now she's favored to win. It ain't over yet. But clearly something has happened. And what has happened is, this will make a little more sense for you, I think, because it only occurred to me recently. How is it possible that Harris has come from being a laughingstock to being the latest incarnation of Martin Luther King's love child with Ronald Reagan? How is it possible that she can talk about what she would do to secure the border if only people would elect her to, position of government? And I think the way to think about this is this. They tried defaming Trump. They tried raiding Trump's house. They tried prosecuting Trump. And eventually they tried killing Trump. And nothing they did had any effect on him. So you got to understand that this is a full court press. That this is everything that they've got. Now, I'm not saying it won't work. I'm just saying this is everything that they've got. Harris hasn't answered any substantive questions, and if you think that the time is going to come when she will, and then she'll melt down like she did during the debate, like Biden did during the debate with Trump, don't count on it. It's going to be the exact same strategy they used with Joe Biden. She's not going to be off prompter at all. She even seemed to manage to get the cackle under control. So she is going to be playing the basement teleprompter strategy that worked to the degree that it worked in 2020, and they're going to count on making her less unattractive than Trump to moderates. There's a lot of people who love Donald Trump, and I'm one of them, and I've liked him better every year. And after the assassination attempt, I just love the guy. But he is, to say the least, a polarizing figure, and no one's coming out to vote for Harris. This whole thing's not about people coming out to vote for Harris. This is about people coming out to vote against Trump, and Trump is his own worst enemy. That's how the man is. That's who he is. I can't spare this man. He fights. So obviously there is going to be at least one debate. I don't think that she can stage manage the debate, and I think he's going to eat her alive on the debate. Tactical Miata over there for Super Chat says they will try again. You have to be prepared for that. Yeah, I am prepared for that. I was prepared when the first attempt happened. And Eric Blake says, plus she toned down the Democratic narrative. With Biden, they kept calling Trump literally Hitler and an existential threat to democracy, so he got Harris to not say that stuff. Plus, Harris now is sounding like Ronald Reagan. I'm going to secure the border. I'm not going to tax tips. The next thing Harris is going to talk about is mandatory gun ownership. And she's in favor of mandatory gun ownership of everybody in the country. She's going to do whatever she has to say to get to the sweet spot. And there are people who are doing testing right now who are determining what do people want to hear, and that's what they'll put on the teleprompter for Kamala Harris. Thank you, Lapco, for just a super chat there, just nothing on it. And these numbers, even in the betting pools, are a real reflection of a phenomenon that was in a book, and I've forgotten who the author is, but it was from the 1800s, I think, or certainly, yeah, I think the 1800s, called Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. The Salem witch hunts were an example of popular delusions and the madness of crowds. The entire limit of their social network, which in modern times is worldwide, but at that time was the village, was this belief that Satan was walking among them in the form of witches, and they simply killed all these people because they'd lost their minds. And all the social proof was telling people, my God, we've got to burn the witches. That's all that's what social proof did in Salem. And we're seeing it now in the pop culture. Here's another super chat from John Doe, or J, sorry, it's the second time I made that mistake, J-Doc. Doing this because my bank thought it was fraud with so many super chats. They texted me, so they canceled those last ones. Sorry, but this gave you more. P.S. They did try to kill Trump. Yes, thank you very much. It's very kind of you to go to all that trouble, and I really appreciate it. So this is their latest attempt to stop Trump because they know that Trump is the end of them. You don't understand. This isn't about power anymore. This isn't about them staying in power. Now this is about them staying out of prison. That's what this is. That's the stakes here. They know that if Trump wins and we get a real Justice Department, they're going to jail. This is survival for them now. They're not. This is no longer about Democrats wanting to cling to power. This is about Democrats staying out of prison, and they are fighting with everything they've got. And when you think about the amount of social proof that's out there, the fact that it's even close to being a 50-50 election is an astonishing statement about the strength of this country. Hang on, I got a first-time chat here. I always take these seriously, too. The truth is Jesus 33. Hang on. Okay. I'm not going to even go to the trouble to delete that. I'm certainly not going to read it. But the first sentence is the Earth is a flat, motionless plane, and from there it goes on. So I'm not even going to give it any attention. It's just spam, and I don't have the time or the effort to go in there and delete it. So the question is, what do you do about that? Well, as I said in the first episode of How to Beat Harris, many people say it's not about who they vote for, it's who they vote against. So we better be thinking about reasons to vote against these guys. Tim Walz is a sitting duck of a target. He's a communist and a fascist, as Steve said in this week's segment. And I'm sorry, it turns out it's not a one-time post. There are some sentiments in what this guy's saying that I agree with, but it's just done in such a, I don't want to use the word hateful because it makes me sound like a patchouli, stinking hippie. But it's just a spew, and I'm not in the mood for spewing. Let me see here. Where did it go? So you can take that rhetoric someplace else. Actually, I just have to find it. I can't. Hang on. Oh, it's in. That's why I can't find it on YouTube. It's in Twitch. Go. Let me see if I can deal with this over here. Hang on, I'm sorry. Yep. Okay. Problem solved. Easier than I thought. Okay. So anyway, that's enough of the non-question segment of our show. So let's get back to the question segment of our show. What do I have to do to get back here? Will that work? No, that's not good. Hang on. Sorry, Twitch. Just 1 second. This should refresh it. And chat room. Yes. Okay. Done. Okay, good. Everything happy? Yes, everything's happy. I got a super chat from Lapco92 for $10 saying, off topic, but have you seen 2009 movie Moon with Sam Rockwell? Yes. I actually liked it quite a lot, and if you wanted, we could talk about that on Monday. Lapco92 also says if the Earth were flat, cats would have pushed everything off of it by now. Yeah. All right. So that's an interesting suggestion there too, Marisha. All right. So let me get to the forum questions, and I actually did this in advance this time, so no delay. Can you imagine? This week curated by our friend Ian Nolan. Again, thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. First question's from Joe Roth. Might be Rotha, but looks like Joe Roth to me. Hi, Bill. Do you really believe the propaganda polls the media is putting out there showing Harris ahead of Trump nationally and in most of the swing states? Makes absolutely no sense that the most unpopular VP in recent history with an under 30% approval rating, with the media hiding her because she's embarrassing, is now all of a sudden America's sweetheart, and now voters adore her and forget about all the problems this administration has caused us and will not vote for Trump now? Makes absolutely no sense to me. I believe the polls are absolutely fake. I urge everyone not to believe them. It does seem like people that do support her seem to think that we are voting in the homecoming queen rather than for who gets to run the country and steer us off a cliff. I kind of don't think it matters if our messaging gets better. The media will never promote it and will do everything they can to squash it. What say you, Bill? Should we really be concerned that we could lose this? Well, we should always be concerned about that. Why on earth would anyone think that she would be any better than Biden? Because she's got a D after her name and she's not Trump. How to go from a +10 Trump advantage to a +2 Harris lead does not make any sense to me. The fact that it's close, I have my doubt that it really is, just boggles my mind and really makes me think that the American people are really that stupid and gullible. Oh, and then there's the cheating. The fix is absolutely in. The fake polls give them plausible deniability. All right. We've talked about this some already, Joe, but let me give you what maybe is a wider view of this. So let's go back to what I said earlier. I put a lot of faith in the election betting odds because people are putting their money there as opposed to polls. But the election betting odds have shown an enormous jump where Harris is well ahead of Trump. So how do you explain that? In my opinion, the only way you can explain the betting, because people are putting money on who they think is going to win, not who they like. It's not who they like, it's who do they think will win. The only people that bet on their horse that when it's a crazy long shot are the people that own the horse. And these people are just making bets on probabilities. So I think the only way you explain that incredible shift in the election betting odds is that the people putting their money down have come to believe that Harris will win. That's what the dynamic is. And this is why I started this whole discussion tonight with social proof. They may not think, they just think that because of all of the incredibly positive publicity that she's gotten, they think that she has the best chance to win, but that is not necessarily what the voters think. We are in the middle of a psychological operation right now. It's a psyops that is determined to change the narrative and therefore leverage the power of social proof. She's gone from being an absolute idiot and wildly unpopular to being, Martin Luther King. And I do agree that the polls are completely fake and slanting it, but those polls are influencing the bettors. That's where I'm trying to go with this. The people who are putting money down are seeing her ahead in the polls, and they're saying, okay, I want to change my bet now because the polls are showing that. So I don't want to say this isn't a problem. This is a big problem. Bone Canoe she and Walter are in the honeymoon period right now. That's true. And Ray Perry with Barry with the super chat says, I don't believe the polls for a hot second. People aren't going to forget suffering through record gas, food prices, energy prices, just like that. Clearly, what's going on now is a full court press. Every single loudspeaker in the country blowing the horn about how great Harris is. And that will eventually wear off because people will go shopping after they've decided, well, maybe there's something to this Harris thing. But no question that our opinions are being manipulated. None, in my mind at all. None. I suspect those numbers are going to narrow, and I expect they're going to probably reverse. But what is true, and this is really important, is that the number of blacks and Latinos and Latinas who have been peeled away from the Democrats and who are now ready to vote for Trump is significant. It's if the Democrats don't get 80% of the black vote, they never win a national election again. And especially Trump's reaction after the assassination attempt has taken a lot of black men away from being either mildly pro-Democrat or indifferent into his camp. These Democrats are so racist that they actually think that Hispanics, I didn't mean to use that term. They don't like it, and I don't like it either. Latinos, they actually think that Latinos are in favor of an open border because they think that Latinos got here illegally. But the voting population of America that's made up from Spanish American or Mexican American, I should say, has no interest in this. So there you go. J-Doc with another super chat says, scared for this election bill, scared. Don't be scared. Just be determined and understand that scare, which affects me too. I mean, I look at those numbers and I just can't believe it's real. Remember that their purpose is to get you to lose faith and to get you to concede defeat emotionally and mentally. That's the purpose. That's the objective, is to wear you down to the point where you feel like the country is gone nuts and you're the only sane person left and everybody else is changing their mind, so I might as well just stay home. That's how it works. And that's what they're trying to do. So let it blow over. This is not 3 days before the election. There's still plenty of time for people to realize what's going on, and reality is out there. And then, fortunately, the Trump team seems to be really pretty good at messaging, especially negative messaging. And he's got some money to spend. So when you start seeing Harris talking about things like open borders, and it's Harris, then a lot of this will go away. So what I'm trying to, I guess the meta of what I'm trying to say about this is that there's nothing that the Democrats can say about Donald Trump that will turn people's minds against Donald Trump. If you're either for him or against him, and the people who are for him are not, there's nothing you can say about Trump, including convicted felon, that's going to change their mind about Trump. And there's nothing you can say about Trump that's going to peel away people that hate him. But Harris, on the other hand, is vulnerable to this. When you see her saying all the things she said, and when you get people saying, Harris saying, I'm going to secure the border, it's like, why would we think you would secure the border when you've been in charge of the border for the last 3 years? Why, just poke a hole in the social proof. You got to, the Trump message team has to be the boy at the end of the parade pointing his finger and laughing and saying she's not wearing any clothes. It's kind of a terrifying thought, really. Lapco92 with a super chat. I'm worried because if the Dems lose, they will try a coup to keep power. Failing that, they have 2 months to crap the bed on the way out. Well, a coup's not going to work. The coup didn't work when the people who are being couped against are the ones with the guns. So if you think that the ones without the guns can have a coup in this country, not going to happen. But the bottom line in this whole thing is, has America hit bottom yet? And I don't know the answer to that. And I won't know until, the first Friday in November. That's assuming the election is called that night. It might go on for weeks or months or however long it takes for them to get as many votes as they need. But the question is, has the country, not have we, but has the country hit bottom yet? That's exactly the way to put it. It's a Alcoholics Anonymous term, a Narcotics Anonymous term, and it's the only term that makes sense. So let's talk about that dynamic for a second here. When you've got somebody who's addicted to something, and we have a significant percentage, probably a third of our population, is addicted to this liberal fantasy about everything, that everything they believe, like let's give money to poor people, they won't be poor anymore. Everything they believe is not only not true, it's anti-true. So, round numbers, a third of the country believes this anti-truth philosophy. A third of the country knows it's absolute bilge. And a third of the country doesn't think about it too much. Not that they're stupid, they're just not involved too much with politics. I wish I could be one of those people, because this is tiring and abrasive work. The question come November will be, of that middle group, how many of them have hit bottom? And if it turns out that the Democrats win in 2024, then it's not the end of the country. It just means that the middle hasn't hit bottom yet. And this is what this is why I've decided to postpone things to come until after the election, because depending on who wins, it's got an entirely different spin to it. But the entire argument of things to come is that there are these 80-year cycles between crises, and that you can see the crisis coming long before it gets here. In 1780s, you get the Revolutionary War, and 80 years later, you get 1860s, you get the Civil War, and 80 years later, you get the 1940s, you get World War II, and 80 years later, you get the 2020s, and here we are. You can tell in all of those cases that it was coming. We knew it was coming for 10 years, but we couldn't avoid the catastrophe. We may not be able to avoid the catastrophe, but this is what I was trying to get at with the difference between, the reason I'm going to hold that show is because the difference between a hard landing and a soft landing. Donald Trump is the soft landing. If Trump is elected, that doesn't immediately mean that all of the problems we had go away. It just means we can start working on them before they get any worse. And actually they will get worse until you can start applying corrective stuff. So if Trump is elected, that's the soft landing, but the catastrophe is still coming, and it's unavoidable. And the good news is there's another side of it, and on the other side is the period of most growth and happiness and conservatism and all that stuff. All of these things just invert after the crisis, but you can't have that inversion without the crisis. So the question is going to be very simply, have enough Americans had enough to snap them out of this fantasy that we live in? Or will it take a complete economic collapse? Or will it take an all XY chromosome Olympics in 2028, which I think is held in LA, isn't it? Isn't that when it is? If 2024 doesn't do it, I'm not giving up. I know a lot of people will be inclined to. I won't be happy, but I'm not giving up. There is a. It's going to take a crisis to shock us out of a world of $35 trillion national debt, and the belief that a man magically becomes a woman because he says so. That's not something that's just going to evaporate, and it's not something you kind of work your way out of. There's going to be a crisis, and the good news is that the crisis is going to affect us, but we will not be consumed by it, because it's going to be a fundamentally a psychological crisis. Not saying that there won't be violence or there won't be problems, but the violence will be in the inner cities and the destruction of the inner cities, and basically conservatives just need to hang on and keep believing in what they believe in, and back to the Marusha said, quote, "It's only when you hit rock bottom that you realize hell has a basement." That's a and the attribution is me. Yeah, hell has a basement. There is a bottom. So back to the Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous thing. People don't go to a 12-step program and sit in a room full of complete strangers and say, "Hi, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic," or "Hi, I'm Bill, I'm an addict." You don't do that when you're on your way down. The only thing that gets people into those rooms is the fact that they are in so much pain that they can't stand it anymore. That's what gets people into a 12-step program. The day comes when the pain becomes so intense that they will do anything to get out of that pain. And that's what hitting bottom is. And when I was in 12-step programs, we would say things like, she was lucky she had a pretty shallow bottom. In other words, she didn't have to end up under a bridge with a needle in her arm, and a gangrene-infected forearm before she hit bottom and started getting help. Some people have an under-the-bridge bottom. Some people's bottom, in fact, many addicts and alcoholics' bottom, is they die. And that's really sad. But most people before they die of their addiction, most people get to the level of pain where they decide, I will do anything, including not even including changing my mind, changing my entire personality. It was one of the things that impressed me so much during those months, and I guess it was about 18 months, maybe 2 years I was in those meetings. For those of you new to the story, I spent about, like I said, 18 months, a little under 2 years in Narcotics Anonymous, and I was the only person in Narcotics Anonymous that I was aware of who didn't have a narcotic problem or a drinking problem. I never used drugs, ever, and I drink socially. I can have a drink or not. But I did have an addiction problem. I had an addictive personality disorder, which means that you are dependent on things outside of yourself for happiness, and you will medicate any way you can to get rid of the pain. And for me, it was I had a good imagination and slept a lot. But one of the many, many, many things that they said in there that just were so wise to me, one of them was, if you ask somebody, how do you make a lot of money, you'll get a bunch of answers. If you ask somebody, how do I get famous, you'd get a bunch of answers. But if you ask somebody, how do you change your life? How do you change the person you are? Nobody has any answers to that. It's the hardest thing there is to do. And they're absolutely right. It is the hardest thing that it is to do, is to not just change your mind. I changed my mind, well, not so much lately, because clearly I'm right all the time now. And the reason I'm right all the time is because I moved to where the truth is. And I've seen enough of the truth now to not be moving a whole lot lately, although every now and then I'll get a little nudge in one direction. But you're talking about changing yourself. And what's depressing about this is that people in San Francisco who love San Francisco, and they're some of the most progressive people in the world, have enacted policies that make San Francisco unlivable. And rather than change their mind, they will change their location. They'll move out of San Francisco and move to Dallas or someplace that works. And they'll bring their philosophy with them, because their philosophy has ruined the place that they used to love so much. And they are so deep in their addiction that they cannot change who they are. They'll just have to go and foul some other campsite. Yeah, or Florida, for example. Now, what does work about that, and I remember when the Babylon Bee did a series on this, on liberals that moved to a conservative state. When they get to conservative states and they're surrounded by conservatives, there's a lot of social proof that says that no, everything you believed back in San Francisco is wrong. The people here are not racist, and they're not homophobes. They're nice people. They're better people, much better people. And that has an effect on folks. In fact, Daily Wire did a study that found that the people that moved to Texas and Florida and so on were actually more conservative than the average Texan, which at first seems hard to believe that, California just come here and makes the state redder, because it seemed to me just the opposite. Common sense would say, no, you're leaving California, you're bringing California with you, you make the state bluer. But what Daily Wire found was, no, the people that leave California for Texas and Florida, or Tennessee, are the people that can't stand to be underneath this blue state tyranny. They're self-selecting for... they're making the difficult... The progressives won't make the decision to change themselves, they'll change the location. Conservatives don't have to change themselves, but changing your location is not just a difficult thing to do, it's a heart-wrenching thing to do if you don't want to go. And I don't want to go. I like it here. I'm not saying they can't make it intolerable for me to be here. They are doing their very best to make it intolerable to be here. But I like it here. And I'm not inclined to want to run from here. Again, I'm not saying that it can't get to that point. I'm just saying it's not at that point right now. I live in a little postage stamp size area of Los Angeles that has 4th of July parade, and the whole neighborhood gets there, and everybody waves the red, white, and blue, and we sing the national anthem, and we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we just all march around the neighborhood. That's the parade. That's where I live. I live in America, in a little tiny little capsule that lives in Los Angeles. Now I listened to something Victor David Hanson said that I thought was really profound, and truly everything else he says is profound. He basically said that in the last 2 years or so, the elites whose political policies have, in other words, what the elites legislate, things like let's close down nuclear power plants because nuclear power is bad. Let's destroy these dams because we want to protect the Delta smelt. And if it turns out that we destroy California agriculture in the process, that's no skin off of our nose because we live in air-conditioned comfort in the Bay Area, and we'll just buy our arugula from wherever the hell they grow arugula other than the Central Valley of California. And their policies make electricity 33 cents per kilowatt hour, which most people can't afford. But the elites can. So their money protects them from their policies. It's the elites who say we don't want private schools, we don't want charter schools, and we surely don't want vouchers because we're liberals and we believe in the public school system, but those same people don't send their kids to public schools, they send them to private schools. This is the constant cognitive dissonance that you have to deal with when you're a progressive or a liberal. What Hanson has said is that in the last 2 years, the situation has deteriorated to the point where their money can no longer insulate them from their choices. What they're basically saying is that what Hanson is saying is that up until very recently, they could advocate for public schools and send their kid to private schools, no problem. But now, even the private schools are either getting so dangerous or so degraded that they are at the point now where they are now actual prisoners in their own gated private security communities. They can no longer do things like go for a walk in San Francisco. They've already made it bad enough that you can't live in San Francisco, but they can't go and visit anymore. I'll give you a better example. During the George Floyd riots here, they smashed all the windows on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. They not only took away their shopping centers and their playgrounds, but more and more crime is moving into Beverly Hills. This is what I mean by hitting bottom. And this is what Hanson meant by having no longer being able to be protected by your money. When people start following people home to Beverly Hills and then breaking into their houses and taking all their stuff or murdering and rape them, that is what hitting bottom means for the elites. The elites will continue to do what they do because they like seeing things around them degrade. It elevates it increases the delta, it increases the contrast. They like it for the middle class to disappear because they don't like a little middle class. they want to be able to drive around in an incredibly nice luxury car, and they don't like the fact that most people can also afford to drive a Lexus or something like that. It bothers them that there's no real gap between them and the middle class. So they're happy to destroy the middle class, and they're happy to have a state that consists of them and gardeners, their gardeners. But we are at the point now where what Hansen calls the destruction of civilization has actually started to reach them in their homes, and they can't do anything about it. They can't go anywhere. For example, they go everywhere in private jets, and all of the celebrities go in private jets, including private jets to the global warming summits. And up until recently, it's just that people have called them hypocrites. But sooner or later, there was a case of somebody broke into an airport and spray painted a bunch of private jets and defaced the jets. Well, they've created an entire generation of people who believe that private jets, among other things, are going to cause the Earth to die, and sooner or later, they're going to be coming after their private jets the way these just stop oil people are going to come and do this. So what happens when they can't fly their private jets anymore? None of this even matters to the super elite, to the Klaus Schwabs and the Bill Gates. What alarms me is the story that a number of these very, very rich people are buying compounds out in like the backwoods of New Zealand or Australia or something, and they're building like entire compounds. That doesn't fill me with joy. But again, the thing to understand about the elites is that they're smarter than the average bear, but they're not smarter than all the bears, and this is their great weakness. They think that because they're smarter than some of the people they know, that they're smarter than all the people, and that's clearly just not true. And so you have this weakness where you have people who are legitimately on an IQ test brighter than the average, but they think they know everything, and they don't know everything. Well, meanwhile, average people do know everything, because an average person is willing to listen to another average person and can usually tell what the truth is because somebody's got the ring of truth. Lapco 92 with a super chat. I'm an American, but lately I find it less embarrassing to call myself Oklahoman. I'm with you, brother. It's weird, but I've written off a good chunk of my country. I don't blame you. In the crisis to come, being an Oklahoman is going to be part of the survival mechanism psychologically. And look, the whole colonies thing is about a post-America, more free place. So I'm right with you, and that's why I think things are going to take off, because I think there's a very, very large market for that. But New Yorkers, for example, take Woody Allen, assuming he's still alive. He's got to be getting pretty nervous now, because Woody Allen has talked his entire life about how terrified he is of dying, and he must know he doesn't have a whole lot more time left. But take Woody Allen. Take Woody Allen from the 80s or the 70s. Take the 70s Woody Allen. Take the Woody Allen from Annie Hall. Take that guy. That guy loves New York City. Doesn't just live in New York City. He is New York City. He and the city are so tightly woven psychologically that you can't separate the two. You can't imagine Woody Allen living in... It's impossible to imagine Woody Allen living in Oklahoma City. It's impossible. So take the people that feel that way about New York, about the dyed-in-the-wool New Yorkers who think that their city is the center of the universe, and it used to be, and that life in the city is the only life that they know or want to know. They could never see themselves in the suburbs and would explode if they went to the country. Well, those people vote Democrat, and they're big old liberals and make big donations to liberals. But now, New York City is becoming unlivable again. And unlike the 70s and 80s, these people didn't grow up when New York was unlivable. These people grew up when New York was, for a large city, practically Disneyland because of Republicans, because of Rudy Giuliani. So New York gets more and more unlivable every day. The crime goes up, the street muggings go up, the public demonstrations go up, the people defecating in the streets. New York City has a historic rat problem now, which doesn't appeal to me, although New York City never really appealed to me, although I was born on Manhattan. And so, it's when I say that there's a crisis coming, and I say that it's not going to affect us directly. Our problem isn't going to be inner city violence. Our problem is going to be refugees from inner city violence. That's what our problem is going to be. And when you think about the percentage of the population that's urban, I did the numbers on a talk I did not long ago, but it's something like 181 million people live in cities or near them. And as the cities decay, because they are decaying, there's nothing you can do about that. The feedback loop is unbreakable. They all vote Democrat because the Democrats promised to give them money and make them dependent. So now they're dependent. Now their life depends on voting Democrat, so they do. So that feedback loop you can't talk somebody out of that. Although there are some signs that it's starting to fray. And so the cities, as far as I can see, are doomed. And as I mentioned talking about the things to come, one of the reasons cities are doomed is you don't need cities anymore. In the industrial era, you need cities. You need to have everything in one place because your entire economy is based on factories. So you have to have a place where the ships can unload. And if not the ships, then a lot of rail. Even Chicago, which is an inland city, couldn't possibly be Chicago without the Great Lakes. So you need a place where you have access to the coast and a good transportation system. And in the industrial era, you need millions of people living within commuting distance to work because they're workers in a factory. And cities have always been located at trade centers. Even before they were cities, there were, you'd have one caravan route would cross another, and you put a settlement there and so on. But the modern city is a result of the industrial era, and people had to live close together in order for the economy to work. You had to have you were either a farmer or you're a factory worker. That's it. That's the industrial era. And so everybody left the country, moved to the cities, and that's how you get New York City. But in the information age, you don't need to live cheek and jowl. It doesn't really matter whether you're in the next room or on the other side of the planet. You do nothing but teleconferencing, and you're sharing all of your work, and it's information-based work anyway. It's entertainment, or it's law or finance. All these things doesn't matter where you are. So, as the cities continue to decay, for the first time in human history, we don't need cities anymore. For the first time in history where we really don't need them. And more people are discovering that they don't want to go to work in cities. They want to work from home. And that means they can, as the cities degrade, they will move their homes somewhere else. There's nothing keeping them in the cities the way that there used to be. There's always something keeping people in the cities, which was their livelihood. That's largely gone now. Most of the businesses in New York City are now information-based businesses like Wall Street, or most of what you see with your own eyes are businesses that serve the people that live in the city. In other words, you walk down the streets in New York, and every other place is a restaurant or a small grocery store or something like that, or consumer goods or whatever. That's what I remember on the streets of New York. So when the money leaves because it's no longer livable, then the first people to go will be the rich people, which is already happening. And when the rich people go, then there will be nobody to go to the restaurants anymore. And then the street life will disappear, and it's already under siege because you can't sit outside on a restaurant in New York now because you'll be hit up for money or mugged for money, or somebody will take a leak on you, or they'll start screaming at the top of their lungs, and so it becomes unlivable even to Woody Allen. Every now and then you'll hear a story maybe once a year about a celebrity that lives in New York who's just walking down the street minding their own business as they have every day for the last 40 years, and suddenly they just get punched in the face. Somebody just walks up and punch them in the face. Happened to Rick Moranis not too long ago, and I hate to use him as an example because I don't know if I'd say Rick Moranis is a conservative, but he was a big fan of Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart told me he met him coming out of the Natural History Museum, and Breitbart said, "I'm just such a huge fan of yours," and Moranis said, "I'm a fan of yours too." So That's what I heard anyway, but I heard it from Andrew. So, you know, you get punched in the face enough walking down the streets of your own city, comes time for you to leave the city. And when that happens, they're going to go to places like Nashville or you know, Fort Lauderdale or Orlando or Dallas, and they're not going to want to change. And this is why that entire argument that I'm making here is, if you don't want to change, you haven't hit bottom yet. And if in November, if enough people vote for the status quo through Kamala Harris, that means that the country, not us, we've been onto this certainly since Obama. It means that not enough people have hit bottom yet. That all of the inflation and all of the inflation, all the crime, it's not enough yet. Rick Moranis said that to Breitbart. Eric, that's what Breitbart told me. Like I said, I'm not saying he's a champion of conservatism. I didn't want to pick him as a big old liberal when he may not be. So we're going to find out whether or not the country has hit bottom. And if the country has hit bottom, then we'll get a soft landing. We'll get Donald Trump. We'll start repairing this damage. But the damage is out there. Those refugees are there. They're not going to magically go away on day one. You're going to have to start that deportation thing. Colonel Angus says, Bill, you should, of all people, should know it's who counts the votes. I do know it's who counts the votes. I've also said many times that 2020 was a sneak attack and that it's going to be a lot tougher to do the second time around. They also had COVID going for them, and mail in your vote and stuff. Just as one small example of how much tougher it's going to. I'm not saying they can't do it, and I'm certainly not saying they're going to try. But one of the things, for example, that is going to make it tougher for them the second time around is that the first time around, Republicans said, no, don't mail in your ballots, vote on election day like you're supposed to. Now I'm hearing, yeah, vote early, I understand that the whole purpose of election day is to severely reduce and practically eliminate cheating. That's why voter registration, obviously, and citizenship, all those things are designed to prevent cheating, which is why the Democrats oppose them. But you can't change the laws back and enforce them unless you get elected, and this is the problem. So we'll find out whether or not the country has hit bottom. I wouldn't be too concerned about the Harris thing right now. If these numbers still look the same in end of October, then I'll still be concerned, but I won't be convinced until the actual election. Because in 2016, they had Hillary up by enough points that Hillary was so sure she was going to win that they were popping champagne corks, and it wasn't until late in the day that they even started to get worried. But the main thing to understand is that the whole thing is a psychological operation designed to get people who oppose the state and the narrative discouraged enough to not vote. Every time I hear a Republican or somebody saying the country's lost, I don't blame them. There are times when I think that myself. But I get up from those times. Those times knock me down, but I get up. And if this helps you, it helped me. Don't forget, no matter what happens in November, it's not that the country's lost; it's that the government is lost. The government is an out of control runaway train that we're on, but the government's not the country, and as far as I'm concerned, the country can never be lost. As long as there's one person who believes in it, then this is a cycle. And the entire idea of the cyclical nature of history is that dead wood and dead brush accumulates, and there's nothing you can do about it, because as long as that thing's not on fire, you're not going to go to the trouble to clear it. That's human nature. That's why the Titanic happened. They knew they were sailing into an ice field, and they were sailing at damn near full speed, but they knew that the record for the Atlantic crossing was something tangible, and hitting an iceberg wasn't. Chances are very good we're not going to hit an iceberg. So they just assumed that the next day was going to be like the last day, and it turned out it wasn't. And so this is how people get stupid. You get too much prosperity, too much comfort, and you get lucky. It's the same thing with Boeing. Boeing's quality control now, the latest I've heard now is that the astronauts may be stuck there till February of 2025. And I saw a report today that said it's not just Starliner, but that the STS, the Space Transportation System, that's supposed to send people back to the moon on the Artemis program, Artemis being the female sister, I think, in Greek mythology of Apollo, that the flight hardware for Artemis, the rocket, the booster, is being rejected by NASA because the number of defective welds is so high. And the reason, when NASA did an inquiry, and I don't particularly trust NASA anymore, but NASA is the buyer, NASA just went to the manufacturer and watched them, and they said, none of the engineers that are making this rocket have any experience in aerospace. And you think to yourself, how can that be possible? And the answer is, inexperienced, young, new engineers don't cost as much as experienced engineers. So we're going to save money, thinks Boeing, by cutting our payroll, and all they do is destroy their reputation, which means they're going to be completely out of business. But that doesn't matter to them, because in the same way as liberals, it doesn't matter to them. If you think that this guy who's making $50 million a year is concerned about Boeing having lost its reputation for excellence and safety, yeah, he's concerned. But if it turns out that they go out of business and nobody buys their stuff anymore, he's still got his $200 million. That's really what it comes down to. It's just that simple. Gavin Newsom can let California go straight to hell, because Gavin Newsom has got tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And all of these people in the bureaucracy that are allowing California and the country to be destroyed, they don't care either, because they have their retirement funds. And until those funds disappear, we're gonna, beatings will continue until morale improves. I thought I'd get through all the questions tonight, but it just doesn't seem likely. But let me get through them as many as I can. How long we can go in at 2 hours and 12 minutes? We could probably do a 3 hour. We certainly can do a 3 hour tour. All right. So that was your wealth. Ian Nolan. Bill, this interview of Mike Benz with a link is one of the best explanations of the blob I've ever seen. Highly, highly recommended. Mike lays out the ties between different organizations, Soros, the State Department. I'll open this and see if I can. Yeah, Russell Brand. See, Russell Brand is a great example. Russell Brand, whom I despised, as an actor and when he was married to what's her name. I just despised him. But he has seen the light. I mean, I'm looking at the frame here, and it says "Stay free." He's been red-pilled. He gets it. And Russell Brand is one of the entertainment elite who was honest enough to open his eyes and say something's wrong here. Anyway, back to the question. Mike lays out the ties between different organizations, Soros, the State Department, Romney, McCain, etc. Not only how the different groups and individuals are tied together, but the mechanisms by which they're profiting off of each other. It's almost enough to build a RICO case. It's more than enough to build a RICO case. Your equity video is good. I appreciate it. Look forward to more. My constructive criticism is that I think you could have shortened it tighter to impact factor would have been higher. Absolutely agree. Do you think Trump's team should focus more on Harris Dems policies, Freudian slip there, or on the ways they're ignoring and breaking the law and their own rules? Both. It seems like either way, both sides are now just mudslinging, although Republican mudslinging is at least mostly true. Yes, that's what I talked about before. There's no mud that can be slung on Trump. Trump is covered in mud, and people love him anyway. That's my main point. There's nothing people can do or say about Donald Trump to negatively influence their opinion of Donald Trump. But Harris, on the other hand, not only hasn't had mud flung at her yet, but she's been dressed in white linen by the media, and so the mud will be much higher contrast. Most people in the middle I know seem to be just turning out either way, tuning it out either way, or is there something else to focus on that can break through? I think we've covered pretty much all of that. I can't think of anything to add to it, Ian, so hopefully over the course of the last 2 hours and 20 minutes, we've got most of that out of the way. Ray Juarez. Bill, apologies for reposting my last message about pirate software. No, thank you. I'm just glad you did. Have another suggestion, though, from Ace Mattingly in the colonies. You should check out the musician Dexter Britton, who does many different styles of music, mostly with piano as the main instrument, and he releases collections labeled Creative Commons. There are a couple of guys out there that use a Creative Commons license, so I will click this link too and check it out. And thank you very much for that recommendation. So, because it's always good to use. Got 2 super chats to take care of again. Here's Lapco 92, who's apparently paying the rent the whole month here. I'm a cautious optimist. Grandpa was born in 1898. Wow. On crutches since he was in World War I, survived the Spanish flu, Great Depression, Dust Bowl, lost a 4-year-old son to bad water. So who am I to whine? See, that's the essence of wisdom. That's conservatism right there. Right? That's just perfect. I have nothing I can add to that. And Crispy Mofo 1776 says, Bill, now the FAA is trying to say SpaceX violated EPA acts with the deluge water. They're next to the Gulf of Mexico. Where are the complaints for Boeing? The toxins from the solid boosters were 100 times worse than the fuel SpaceX uses. They're trying to stop SpaceX. The FAA is doing everything in its power to stop or SpaceX, slow it down to the point where Musk won't get to Mars before he dies of old age, because the government has invested in STS and to some degree Starliner, but mostly because Musk is moving so fast that he's showing you what's possible. Forget the launches. They're about to do flight 5. They'd be on flight 9 or 11 or something like that now without the government. If they were moving if this were moving at the speed of SpaceX, we'd easily be on flight 9, 10, 11 by now. And when you look at what's happening at Spaceport or Starport or whatever it's called in Boca Chica, they are building things so quickly that I am astonished that it's physically possible. It's absolutely amazing. They will tear something down and put something up. They'll take engines off the rocket and roll it back out a few hours later. These are the kind of things that would take the government months and months just to study. And this makes them look bad. It makes them look bad. So, we'll see. But if you really want to know why the FAA and everybody else is getting in the way, many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I was doing eject, I went up to a company called X-Core Aerospace in Mojave. They're no longer in business because the government's put them out of business. But basically, Jeff Grayson, who was the CEO of that company, said, NASA's job now is to keep people out of space. NASA's job is to prevent companies from going into space. That's what NASA exists for now, is to prevent people from getting into space, unless they're on a rocket that's got NASA on the side. And the analogy that I've heard is that, if the FAA had the kind of power over the air that at the time of commercial aviation, then we'd all be riding from Los Angeles to New York in an FAA-built airplane, which would have 4 propeller engines, would fly at 7,000 feet, would take you 13 hours to fly from Los Angeles to New York, and you'd pay $7,000 a seat for the ticket. That's what would happen if there was a government airline. So, by the way, SpaceX. So, there it is. I don't know what to say about it other than that. So thank you for the link. Troy Stevens said Trump in the Elon Musk X conversation regarding the assassin's bullet that grazed him. In this case, it was probably the best alternative you could even think about because it went the right angle. How can you not use that in future right angle episodes show intro? It's 57 minutes and 40 seconds in. I will take a look at that and maybe take you up on that. Not entirely sure I want to be associated with an assassin's bullet, but the fact that he mentioned right angle was a nice benefit. And in this case, just having Trump say right angle, I could probably do something with that. So, Yeah, that's maybe the thing to do is just put up a card that says, President Trump, what's your favorite political commenter? Right angle. Thank you very much. Boy, the super chats are coming in hot and heavy tonight. From Crispy Mofo 1776. The only point I disagree with you in that SpaceX would be where they are now, maybe a launch or two ahead. They're just starting to build V2 hardware, so they're going at the pace they need to. Well, their V2 hardware is coming from what they learned from the test flights. It's not that they don't have this stuff on the board, and it's not that they don't have the money to get it done. They can't develop V2 hardware until they find out what all the bugs in the V1 hardware are. Yeah, so the Starship Mark II, I'm not sure if it's flying on the next test flight. It might be. But their Raptor 3 engine, by the way, if you look at the Raptor 3, you look at Raptor 1, Raptor 2, and Raptor 3. Raptor 1 looks like a traditional engine because there's just wires and tubes everywhere. Raptor 2 looks like a cleaned up version of Raptor 1, but Raptor 3 looks like a rocket engine that you would find under the hood of a car. It's unrecognizable from any other rocket engine in the world. It looks like it's made out of one piece because it essentially is. It's using computer aided design and they're just 3D printing it. And it's more powerful and lighter weight. And so they will continue to build these things and they'll continue to iterate forever, but they can't iterate any faster than they get the data, and they can't get the data any faster than they can do the flights, and they can't do the flights any faster than the FAA will grant them permission. So I think that's pretty much where SpaceX is. Yeah, but they only built the V2 hardware now. They're just getting all of their assembly buildings. The Raptor 3 is something out of an exotic something or other. Yes, but the pace, SpaceX's pace, is not determined by Elon Musk. It's determined by their launch license. And we've seen it again and again and again. I remember I think it was after Flight 3, they were ready to go. They'd made something like 100 changes in 31 days, and they were ready to go, and they had to wait 2-3 months for the next launch license. There's no question in my mind that's exactly what's happening here. So anyway, moving on. Broke college student. Hello, Bill. Hey, BCS. I recently finished your Empire of Terror series on Daily Wire. I thought it was an effective gut punch. Thank you. Topic: conservative approach to American peoplehood. Interesting. A portion of the populist conservative side criticizes the attitude that America is an idea instead of a people. Yeah, I think it's true. Essentially, ideas are held by people, and the continuation of an idea or a tradition requires the continuation of its people. If America is purely an idea and not a people, then anyone who does not ascribe to the Constitution is not American. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Continuing this peoplehood argument, the Constitution holds no inherent power and cannot be appealed to. It's merely the formalization of the ideals held by the American people. I disagree with this. The Constitution holds enormous power. In fact, the Constitution holds absolute power so long as you live in a lawful society. Because the Constitution is the law of the land, top law of the land, and it legally inhibits the government from infringing on individual freedoms. And as long as people are forced to obey the law, I'm not saying people are law-abiding by nature, but as long as politicians were forced to obey the law because we had an actual news media or something, then the law had to be enforced. And if something was unconstitutional, then you couldn't do it. Nowadays, if something's unconstitutional, it's just an opinion. But moving on, another populist disagreement is that of collective guilt. Yeah, that's a sign of a weak mind. Collectivists have weak minds anyway, weak-willed. They're the people that say that string is longer than the one that they can see. They're the people that go along with that because they just don't have enough faith in themselves to have any character. And collective guilt is, do I feel guilty about the U.S. Having held slaves, being a slaveholding nation? No, I don't feel guilty about that because I didn't hold any slaves. I am somewhat ashamed of it. Needless to say, I know what the history of slavery is and understand that Great Britain, slightly before America, but within 2 decades of America, abolished slavery, and the U.S. abolished slavery and paid a big price in blood, and these are the only 2 major civilizations that have ever done that in human history, ever. So, yes, I'm ashamed that it happened, but I'm not guilty about it. Anyway, back to the question. Another populist disagreement is that of collective guilt. People do hold members of a population responsible in some capacity for the actions of their members. That is why the media will tend to obfuscate characteristics of a criminal if it looks bad. Yes, exactly. They won't show. There is some evidence. I don't want to go too far out on this limb here because I haven't seen much of it, but there is some evidence that the shooter in the Trump assassination attempt actually was a trans individual. But you don't see those pictures. You see pictures of him taken 6 years before when he's like in junior high or whatever. And the fact that they're using pictures that are so old is telling me that there's something they're hiding. So that's completely agree on that. A further development of this is that conservatives over-individualize people and do not recognize the unchosen bonds that people have with their families, communities, and peoples which define them. I'd rather go too far in the individual direction than in the other way. But yes, to some degree, I suppose it's possible to say that if you believe America is an idea, you might think that the composition of the people in America doesn't matter, but the composition of the people in America are what makes the idea of America being an idea, a viable social construct with, laws behind it versus just an opinion. I didn't write more to have the question answered. Can you steelman these positions? Oh, I like that. I've never heard that term before. And provide your position. What do you think it means that these opinions are becoming more popular out in the open? Let me just tell you what my knee-jerk reaction to this kind of thing is, and has always been, just so we're clear. And this is not me covering my ass. This is a genuine, fundamental belief that I have. I would rather live in a country where I was the only white person and everybody else was Thomas Sowell than live in a country where everybody else was white and were Jon Stewart. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I don't have any hesitation saying that whatsoever. If the country could be 100% black if they were all Thomas Sowell, and I'd be happy, be delighted. Much rather live there than here. The problem is that not everybody's like Thomas Sowell. The greatest tragedy that I've seen in my life, and it is monumental, may have been the greatest tragedy in American history, is not so much that I was just talking about slavery. Slavery was a tragedy, but when I think about how close we were to putting that behind us and moving on as a people, before we dove back into it, is a catastrophe. Locomotive says that's a pure fantasy. 100% Thomas Sowell country is a pure fantasy. Of course it's a pure fantasy. Of course it's a pure fantasy. The way you explain something is by going to the extremes of the argument and simply saying, oh, well, I didn't actually believe that it was possible to live in a country that consists of nothing but Thomas Sowells, because Thomas Sowell, among other things, has an IQ that's 3 times the national average, and you can't have people with 3 times the average be the average. But look, there was a time when the Irish weren't welcomed in this country, and the Irish came and they brought some changes, and there's no way to say that they didn't assimilate. The problem has been that it's only since the civil rights movement, and really since the 70s or 80s, that assimilation was no longer part of the deal. This was the melting pot. The idea would be that you would bring your culture with you, and it would be subsumed into the larger culture, which wasn't enforced upon you. It was part of the deal. The reason you wanted to come here to America from another country was because you wanted to be a new person. This is the new world. All Americans are new people. And the idea that you could come here and remake yourself as a new person and live better was what brought people to America, because you couldn't get in otherwise. Since then, we've gone to the salad bowl thing, where you can be lettuce and you can be tomatoes and you can be onions, and we'll all live together in harmony like a salad. It doesn't work that way. There's never been a multicultural society that's ever succeeded. And in fact, the closest to a bicultural society I've ever seen is Canada. And there really are two Canadas. And every time I see everything that's published in Canada, it's in English and French, and I think it's French first usually. I just think this is absurd. This is an absurd way to go. Just stop. Take Quebec and just make it Quebecia, and stop this insanity. I just think it's ridiculous, and I think that's obvious to the Canadians. I think Canada and Quebec would both be much happier if they were two different countries. But when you start doing this to America, this is why I have such a and you don't see it so much anymore because there's been enough pushback on it. But this is why when you get an automated you call the bank and you get an automated phone answering system, and they would say press 1 for English. That made a lot of people angry. It made me angry. It's like, no, I'm not going to press 1 for English. This is an English-speaking country. And it was always press 1 for English, press 2 for Espanol. And I'm thinking, well, then why not press 3 for Chinese, press 4 for Korean, press 5 for French, press 6 for Swahili, press 7 for Japanese. It's this English-Spanish America as a bicultural country is the end of America. And to be honest about it, most people who come here are perfectly okay with this. And anybody with any kind of a soul or reason or both would have no problem with this at all. If I were to go and move to Japan, I wouldn't immediately do my best to make Japan into America. I don't have that kind of nerve. I don't have that kind of arrogance. If I went to Japan to live, I wouldn't start expecting people to speak English. And I wouldn't expect the banks to say, in Japanese, press 1 for Japanese, press 2 for English. Now, as it turns out, English is the international language because 2 successive dominant world powers have been both English-speaking. That's never happened before. There's never been one dominant culture that was succeeded by another dominant culture that had the same language and the same culture, but the British Empire gave way to the American Republic, and so English has been the lingua franca of the world for 200-300 years now, especially since World War II. So I like the fact that a lot of people, thank you very much for Craigie with that $20 super chat from our friends in Australia, and I was just going to say, this is what unifies the Anglosphere. The Anglosphere is the West. There's very few countries that I would consider to be in the West philosophically that's not part of the Anglosphere. The United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. Although New Zealand has always been a little sketchy, frankly. But Aussies are our best friends in the world, and Australians are so good they're damn near Americans. I had so much fun down there. I spent 3 months down there. I just loved Australia. I loved Australia. Loved Australians. Thought it was great. Lapco92 with another super chat. Now I can go buy a Mercedes. I find myself waiting for American feminists to identify as onions, pale, round, unwashed, and the more layers you peel away, the more you want to cry. Also, they make your breath smell bad. So, look, there's an assault on Western values, and the assault on American values is a subset of that. And given the amount of pressure that these Marxists and progressives have put on the structure, you would have thought that the structure would have collapsed a long time ago. But it won't. It's too powerful. The West is, the idea of the West is too powerful. It's not too powerful to be damaged. And I'm not even saying it's not too powerful to be, it's too powerful even to be crippled. It's too powerful. Western thinking has produced everything. Everything. When you see, like the tuk-tuks in Thailand, these are little tiny, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, it's been 12 years since I was there, but it's either a motorcycle or a very small engine and then a flatbed truck where they welded on a steel plate and people sit on benches and it carries, 10 or 12 people, maybe something like that. and I was in Thailand, and I was hanging onto the rail. I was standing on a like a lowered step on the back of this tuk-tuk, and I was just hanging onto a rail, and I was just hanging there off the edge, and nobody was pulling me over saying that's not safe, and I didn't have to wear a helmet. It was a lot more free than my country, a lot more free, and it was nice having people not telling me what to do. On the other hand, however, those tuk-tuks were not manufactured in Thailand, and neither were the cell phones that everybody was using, or the electrical generation plants, or any of that stuff. It's hard for us to appreciate just how much of the West is out there. Every time I look at some third world, shithole, I look at this and say, well, they've got cars, and they've got electricity, and maybe it's sporadic, and they've got cell phones, and cell phones are communicating to each other through satellites and microwave towers, and it's like they didn't build any of this. None of this came from the third world. None of it came from the second world either. None of this is Russian technology. One of the most evocative images. There's a movie. It's real obscure. I want to say it's called War Witch. It's about like civil war in Africa. It's a really good movie about this young girl whose village is raided by these warlords, and they're convinced that she's got magical powers to protect them, and it's a great film. And there's one shot of her, and she's walking up this dusty country road with a pack on. She's just carrying all this stuff, and there's nothing in sight except for this absolutely enormous radio dish, radar dish. It looks like a radar dish. Absolutely enormous. It's a huge Soviet radar. And it's completely rusted out, and panels are missing, and the rust is running down the side. Hasn't moved in 15, 20, 30 years. And it's like a relic. The reason it's so striking is because it looks like it's from the future, but it also looks like it's been left to rot for 50 years. And that's exactly what it is. This African tribal woman walking past this enormous radar, it looked like a radio telescope. And the thing is it's just rusting into nothing. It's like this is what the West is. And one of the first political thoughts I ever had, I think is one of the first things I ever talked about on the Stratosphere Lounge, was this idea that you look at the third world and you wonder, why are their building standards so poor? And why is the sanitation so poor? And all the rest of it. Then by the way, you start asking yourself, well, why is Los Angeles becoming a third world country? Because it's... My wife, when she first got here, we're driving down the 405. And I thought she'd be completely amazed by all of the cars and, be blown away by this, wizard American technology. And she said, this road is worse than the roads in Istanbul and Cairo. I've been to both of those places, and this is not good. And that was a real wake-up call for me. But anyway, it's not obviously it's a technological advantage, but it's not like the technology fairy flew over America or the West and just went, ding, I'm going to give it to you. Everything China has is essentially stolen technology from the West. And it's not because the technology fairy hit the West, flew over these other countries, and just decided to bestow its blessings on us. It's because we have individual rights, individual freedoms, even still, despite all of the regulations and the erosions of our freedom and opportunity, despite all of that, you can still be a guy who made several $1 million on PayPal and then wanted to go to Mars, so he started a rocket company. There's lots and lots of very, very effective high-tech little defense industry companies. I've got a right angle on Boom Aerospace, which is a company that's trying to build a new SST. They've done the very advanced aerodynamics to turn the sonic boom into a sonic thud. They've built a flying prototype. It's not vaporware. It's not just beautiful renderings. And this guy is saying the same thing I said a minute ago about the FAA. He said there's so much flight shaming. That's what he called it, flight shaming. He says, can't we just go faster? Wouldn't you rather go from LA to New York in 2 hours instead of 5? Wouldn't that be better for everybody? And so these companies are out there, and there are no equivalents anywhere else in the world to this. Let's just say it again. I mean, obviously I'm a SpaceX booster, but the reason I'm a booster, such a booster for Elon Musk and SpaceX, is because this private group of individuals is doing something that no nation in the world can do, including the United States of America. There's no government in the world can do what these kids at SpaceX are doing. The Chinese can't do it, the Russians can't do it, the Europeans can't do it, and America can't do it. Get out of the way, man. Just get out of the way. So, anyway, probably beat that to death. I hope I did. Steelman, I love it. It's really epic. At Roadrunner, we got an Eric Blake, we got a Marisha Dark, we got a Roadrunner, we got a Dave Olson. Not a chance of getting through all these. So I know in advance, so you can prepare your wailing and gnashing of teeth. I'll definitely do Roadrunner. I'll definitely do an Eric Blake, and I'll do a Marisha Dark. And if I can get to the Dave Olson, I will. But I can't do duplicates, so we'll just can't. All right, so Roadrunner. Just hung around long enough to hear you answer Ian Nolan's question. Thanks, Ian, for asking. Thanks, Bill, for answering. Let's see. Oh, that in February 2025, before NASA and Boeing get those 2 astronauts, Izzard and Gizzard off of the space station. The question, can you explain to non-steely-eyed missile men and missile women the launch logistics of SpaceX and why they can't just send a rocket and pick up those 2 astronauts and bring them back home safely before next year? Not being facetious, you've got a more informed view than most. We've just talked about SpaceX and all of this, but I will add one more thing. Of course SpaceX can go and get those people home. Of course they can. They can. If it had been an emergency, they could have done it at any time. So why aren't they doing it? Because for SpaceX to go up and rescue those people will be to prove the point that I made, which is SpaceX works and the government-funded program with the big defense contractors doesn't work. And they can't admit it. That's why they're slowing SpaceX down. On one hand, they have to slow SpaceX down, but on the other hand, they would rather imprison those astronauts up there for nearly a year rather than admit that their stuff doesn't work. So it's not just the government that's got a vested interest in this. Boeing has an enormous vested interest in this. The alternative, if you send a Dragon capsule up there to get those astronauts, what you're saying is that the private sector works better than the public sector, private sector hydra of big government and big defense industry. They just do a better job. They can't admit that because, frankly, it's either safe to come back on the Starliner or it's not. And when that decision is finally made, the inevitable result is that capsule is going to have to be cut loose. Now, the Boeing guys say they can do the reentry without people on board, and they'd still get data from the reentry. But look, man, what you're admitting is we have to cast this garbage off so that we can have a docking port available to put a real spacecraft in its place and take these people back. When I think about this Starliner thing continues to cascade. It's not like the time for recovering it gets shorter. It's getting longer by every week. They're announcing a 2-month delay, a 5-month delay. Now I'm not saying they will never reach the point where they cut their losses, but they have not hit bottom yet. That's for sure. And they just are they're just going to have to. They would much rather eat that than. And the bad publicity of it, then have the optics of time to kick this piece of junk off the space station and have Elon Musk and private industry come up and rescue this government-funded cost plus. By the way, the whole STS system and Starliner is cost plus, which means that they agree on a price, and then any delays or overages are paid for by the government, and then there's a surcharge on top of that. So, at cost plus, Boeing can say we could do it for $1 billion, but if it ends up taking $2 billion, then the government pays the $2 billion. And the longer that Boeing takes to pay its standing army, the higher the prices go, and Boeing has no incentive not to do that. On the contrary, Boeing has every incentive to delay this program as long as possible, because no matter how expensive it gets, they have signed a contract that says that the government will pay for it. Boeing has a vested interest in making stuff that doesn't work, and SpaceX doesn't. Crispy Mofo says, no, that'd be eating crow. Yeah, they'd be eating crow. The optics are the optics right now are not good, but they're not good for space nerds and people like us who follow these things. It would be kind of news if to the general public if you had to go up there with a Dragon capsule and bring these people home. And as I've said before, that spacecraft is not getting healthier. It's not like time is on their side. Smurf Magoo says, "Thou shalt not eat crow." Yeah, that should be on our money now. Time is not on the side of that capsule. It's aging. Batteries are getting older. None of the valves are getting newer. None of the helium is being replaced. Every delay makes it less likely that it's going to work. And it deserves to fail. Like I said, I want it to fail. I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want to have any astronauts killed, but I want it to fail because they've spent $4 billion on it, and I don't want them to spend $5 billion or $6 or $7 or what else. And the same thing goes for Artemis, which is a joke. They flew the damn capsule around the moon for 2 weeks or whatever, and then they said our next flight will be 2 years later. SpaceX flies a much, infinitely more complex system, and they say our next flight will be in 60 days, probably 45, and then they sit around and wait for the government to stamp their license. One works and the other doesn't, and SpaceX and the government and SpaceX and Boeing are the country in microcosm. Boeing is greed capitalism run wild. You cut engineers who know what they're doing and replace them with engineers who don't, because you save money doing that in the short term. But in the long term, you destroy the company. But they don't care because that guy gets his $50 million every year. That's capitalism, and that's bad. It doesn't have to be that way. Boeing for 40, 50 years was just one of the most beautifully run companies that made an incredible product. And the culture just shifted. And now you find other companies, like I'm sure Boeing had DEI involved with this, but United, or I think it was United, said we're not going to hire any more white male pilots. Go to an airport. Go like I did to Oshkosh. Go see where the people who are paying money to be interested in airplanes are. It's got to be 95% white males. I don't know why that is. I have a few ideas, but I don't know why. Marisha says, that's capitalism and that's bad. I said, well, that's greed capitalism and that's bad. Look, capitalist republic is not a perfect form of government. It's just the best form of government that there is so far that we found. And when people are playing by the rules, let me rephrase that. When you have a virtuous population, it's astonishingly good. But when you don't, then not only does the government side suffer, but the business side suffers. So ultimately it's a conservative argument, because it's saying that there is a fault line in the human heart, and that people cannot be trusted to do the right thing. It goes against the entire idea of the Constitution is a violation of the perfectibility of man. That's a progressive argument. We'll make the new Soviet man, or the new French man, or the new this man, or the new man. We're going to remake human nature. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't beat the biology out of people. All you can do is restrict it, and in order to do that, you have to have a virtuous population. Let me see here. Okay, we got Eric, we got Immersion, we got Roadrunner. Did I just do a Roadrunner? I think I just did. Let me just check. I don't want to do anybody twice. Oh, that's Road Rider. I'm sorry if I called you Roadrunner there. That's just, sorry about that, Road Rider. Okay, I'm running out of voice here, but let's see what we got. Oh man, I don't know. None of these are duplicates that I can see. And I hate leaving people out of this. But I'm starting to feel my voice going, and that's probably not good to push that. How long we've been? 2:49? Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll do a 3-hour tour, and after the 3-hour tour passes, then I'm going to have to call it there. All right, so Eric Blake is next. And there's a typical Eric Blake introduction, which I think you've probably already got as read by now. I want to take a look at the massive cultural and political gift we appear to be getting and might be too good to be true. Namely, the U.S. Department of Justice is talking about cracking down on Google after the court ruling declaring it a monopoly. Yes, Bill, assuming you didn't know this already, you read that right. It looks like Google is at long last looking at a Standard Oil AT&T style breakup. I've heard it. I'll believe it when I see it. Because the political party in power now has a vested interest in the control of information, the absolute control of information. I'll believe it when I see it. Now, of course, every conservative, myself included, has given the immediate reaction of a great big hallelujah. I mean, just imagine what a Google breakup means. YouTube in particular is ripe for the taking, be it by Elon Musk, Nelson Peltz, Kevin O'Leary, Vivek Ramaswamy, or even maybe even Trump's kids. Heck, all of them together could take the whole pie, dividing the pieces of Google into empire amongst themselves. But, like Colombo Bill, there's just one thing that's bugging me about this. Who's in charge of the DOJ right now? Well, I answered the question actually in the first paragraph. Yes, it'll happen when there's a Department of Justice that enforces antitrust laws. And as long as the power that runs the Department of Justice has a vested interest in total control of information, I'll believe it when I see it. Now, I hope they're just trying to stop the bleeding for our own efforts, lawsuits, etc., but what if they just wave the white flag like this without any contingency plan? Why would they wave the white flags like this? They won't. Perhaps they've got some leftist billionaires lined up they hope to beat out the takeovers. Again, I'll believe it's broken up when it's broken up. I don't know, Bill, I hate to be cynical and look at this apparent miracle. It just looks a bit too good to be true to me. What say you? I say it is too good to be true. If Donald Trump is elected, then it will happen. And if he's not, then it won't. I don't know how to put it more plainly than that. The president appoints the attorney general and appoints the director of the FBI, and all of the agencies are part of the executive branch. And if we have a Trump win, then we have a Department of Justice again. And if we don't, then we go 4 years without it. We'll continue to get beaten until we hit bottom. Marusha Dark, topic, polite society. I actually wrote this question some weeks before Scott's segment about politics at work. Setting aside the particulars of what people on any given side believe, it's a common social custom that thou shalt not talk about religion or politics at family gatherings. It's considered rude and divisive to engage in these subjects since both topics carry strong emotional baggage and identity. Moreover, most people don't seem to know how to talk to one another in general. However, outside of family gatherings, there aren't a lot of times when people of opposing views are actually forced to spend time together, so there's no incentive to really have these conversations throughout most of the year either. Indeed, a lot of the antipathy that people have towards social functions is the fact that they have to deal with those people who think and believe something radically different. So as a person who hates small talk but loves talking about religion and politics, and who also sees it as necessary to heal such divisions in the world, when does polite society get to have these difficult conversations? How do we begin to erode this social custom? Should we even? What is the proper time and place to engage those who think differently, particularly if one's a teetotaler who doesn't gather at the local pub and whose office conspicuously lacks a water cooler? For the sake of interest, assume the answers like never and you're not supposed to are invalid. Scott is great at this. Scott is Jiminy Cricket for me and for as a representative of the conservative movement. I know he says a lot of things that people disagree with, but he is the conscience of I'm not saying he's right about everything. I'm just saying that he has got the moral courage to promote a viewpoint that's not shared by many conservatives in a lot of ways, and so I respect that, and it does an incredible, valuable good, and we should be celebrating that. So being prepared to face the full opprobrium of Scott Ott, I think it's a fair thing to say that the amount of plugging your fingers in your ears is not equal on both sides. My lived experience has been, and this is not too hard to prove, is that we live in a society where the entire loudspeaker of pop culture is very left-wing leaning. So we're exposed to their ideas on a regular basis. And furthermore, that same machine that broadcasts liberal ideas also suppresses conservative ideas. So we're forced to listen to liberals a lot more than liberals are forced to listen to conservatives, which is why they can say that we're Hitlers and racists and homophobes when people from those groups black individuals or Latino individuals or homosexuals or whatever the case may be go out and hang out with conservatives, their first reaction is utter shock that they're not the bigots and homophobes that we're made out to be. That's the first reaction. The second reaction is somebody lying to them. And the third reaction is, I'm voting for Donald Trump. So it's not a level playing field where both sides are equally at fault here. I've also found that the primary essence of progressivism and liberalism is a belief in something despite all evidence to the contrary, and that you are judged by your belief in something independent of whether such a thing is possible or true. In other words, there are things that good people believe this is the progressive viewpoint, that all good people believe in uniformly, and if you don't believe in these things, you're a bad person. And the reason they have to go to that emotional extreme is because reality is not answering their ping. It's not answering their doorbell. Like I said earlier, the great example is they believe that if you give poor people money, then they won't be poor anymore, when that's got essentially nothing to do with it. I'm not saying people don't start out in a disadvantage, and there's no question about that. But one thing that the lottery shows us is that more often than not, much more often than not, you give people a large hunk of money, and not only do they lose it, but they also end up, in many cases, more miserable than they were before because they become dependent on the money. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people who win the lottery quit their jobs. Like $25 million. I quit my job too, except that I don't have a job. I haven't worked certainly since I left PJTV. And even that was kind of fun. So they quit their jobs, and then they go through the money because they don't know how to handle the money. And then they don't even have the job anymore. And they've lost all their friends, because all their friends and relatives and people who I haven't seen since high school start calling them all of a sudden and saying, "Oh, Bill, how are you? I've been meaning to stay in touch with you. I've just missed talking to you so much. How you been? Oh, how's the wife? Oh, that's wonderful. How's I like Los Angeles? It's great. Oh, that's great. Well, fantastic. You still into flying? I love flying. Yeah, well, hey, listen, I was wondering." And, so they end up worse off than they were before they got the money. You could vote $200,000 of reparations to anybody who asked for them. And in the space of 2 years, that $200,000 would be in the hands of people who are already rich, because they know how to handle money, and they understand how to protect money and grow money, take care of money, and not. I spent many years working with Peter Gruber, who brokered the deal for the sale of, I think it was Columbia to Sony. And he was rewarded for this by a paycheck of $700, if I recall correctly. Peter, if you're watching this, I actually loved Peter Bart and Peter Gruber. I loved him. One of them is a giant left-wing movie producer. The other one's a giant left-wing former editor of Variety. But I loved him. I loved working on that show. I loved those two men. But the story I heard was that Gruber got $750 million for that deal. What I know for an absolute certain fact is Peter Gruber would go to the Cannes Film Festival, and when he would come back, he would submit receipts for $2.75 for bagels. And I thought, my God, that's ridiculous. Ridiculous. He's expensing $2.75 for bagels, and then I realized, no, it's not ridiculous. Peter Gruber's a valve. He's a check valve. Money comes in, and very little money goes out, and all the money that can come in comes in, and nothing goes out unless it's absolutely necessary. And that's when I realized that's why Peter Gruber has $750 million and I don't, because he knows how to handle his money, and he makes his money work for him, as all wealthy people do, and so on. I don't need to be $750 million wealthy. In fact, I think that'd be the only. Yeah, I don't want to be that rich, and it's just I don't need to be that rich. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't mind being rich enough to be able to buy, private jet and fly that. And I wouldn't, and the only other level of rich above that would be rich enough to go to Mars. If I had $4 billion, you could probably get to Mars, or most of the way there on that, although Musk has spent more than that. So either I want to be rich enough to go to Mars, pay for it, not buy a ticket. I mean, I thought I'd have to pay for it. This is one of the reasons why I think so highly of him, and I'm wearing his T-shirt, is because he's doing things that I didn't think I'd live to see. Capicinato says we've been having the colonies watch parties. That's what I would do with real money. Is I'd open a studio. I'd open an actual studio, and I'd hire really good people, and I would, and if the script had any politics in it, I'd reject it. Yeah, I'd love to be working on that full time. I really, really would. And tomorrow's my Mace Mattingly day, and I'll write the. I have to release the Harris thing on Sunday morning. That's the best time to drop it. Since I'm going to be using notes, I'll probably do that on Saturday instead. I got behind, and I've got 2 appointments tomorrow, and so we'll see. And I have to, I'm still behind on editing the right angles, which I should have done on Tuesday. But I'm trying to stick to this new schedule. I'm behind on the new schedule, but that's because I'm not used to it, but I'm doing my best. So while I hate to cut off questions, I think I'm about done with this one. It's a 3-hour show now. And Gavin says, if I win the lottery, I'll buy you a studio. Well, I'll take it. Thank you. I'll do some good with it. There are times when I say to myself, everything else is a waste of time. Just get that done. But it's very difficult to get from here to there without the steps in between. So the whole thing is based on crowdfunding, and crowdfunding is not something that you can do on your own. You have to know what you're doing with crowdfunding, and you have to have commitments from people who can drive that kind of traffic to the site. Drinker did it for apparently a movie that he's got in production, and we'll see. I'm curious to know whether it's any good. But he's done it because he's built his audience, and that's kind of where I am right now too. You can't just jump from here to there. But I'm really excited about the Mace Mattingly thing. I got a lot of stuff to talk about with the progress of AI, but that's a Monday conversation. There's a famous video where AI tried to do Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it's horrific. It's just a nightmare. And now it's perfect, and it got done in a year. A year is between those two. I'm going to run that video, and things are happening so fast that I almost don't know where to go with the technology. But I do know that I don't want to. I do not. Not only do I not want to. I don't think we're even close to being able to bring the vision that I want to bring by typing in prompts. That's the advantage of 3D filmmaking for me now. Traditional computer graphics. I can see hardware and say I like that design. My hope is that when we're really ready to go on this, that there will be AI video that will essentially do this. Here's a computer-generated image. Process that image to make everything in it absolutely photorealistic, but don't change anything. Change the faces, give them real texture, but don't change the shape of the faces. Here's a crane with a pressure thing on it for so on. Just make that metal look better. That's what I hope. Right now, my limit is I want to do metahumans with facial motion capture, like I did for the Mace Mattingly interview, and then I want to deep fake a real face on top of that so that it looks very nearly photorealistic. It's all the faces. Hardware is at the point now where it's indistinguishable from reality. And virtually everything in the colonies is hard surface stuff. Spaceships, habitats, easy to do stuff. It's the humans and the clothing that's still kind of tough. I'm beginning to think my motion capture suit is obsolete now, because even the people that make the suit have software that allow you to just move in front of a wall and the video analyzes it and turns it into motion capture. But I haven't been on that for almost a year now, and I'm looking forward to see what they can do. So I'll be working on some of that tomorrow. Patriot in the Dark says, hey, Bill, speaking of AI, do you know where I might be able to pick up a personal EMP? I don't, but I mentioned that before in something where I said, you think about AI and how powerful it is and how, threatening it is and stuff. And then I realized, yeah, but EMP is fatal to AI. And EMP, humans are just, what happened? Did something happen? We don't even feel it. We're immune to magnetic fields. Magnetic fields generate current when exposed to copper and any kind of other circuitry, and they just burn that circuit out. But we don't have ferrous metals inside us, at least not to that degree. It's why we can go in an MRI. So my answer is, I think we could probably live with trying AI so long as we had a series of EMP devices in orbit that had a plunger and were manned by a human. No electronic switches, nothing. Just so anyway. All right, I'm sorry for the ones I didn't get to, but in any event, that'll do it for us tonight, I think. So the show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who continue to keep the Gorn standing and James T. Kirk working on the cannon, among other things. As Marisha points out, they have bioweapons. So mutually assured destruction is our best chance of survival, in my opinion. But I want it to be mutually assured. Best thing I ever heard about defense was from some defense secretary or general or something years ago. He said, the day may come when the lion and the lamb lie down beside each other, but if that day comes, we'd better damn sure be the lion. I thought that's my philosophy in a nutshell. I'd love for the lamb and the lion to lie down together in peace and harmony, but if that happens, we'd better damn sure be the lion. Perfect. All right, that'll do it. Thanks very much for joining us. We're going to sign out of YouTube here. Thank you for joining us, YouTube, and we'll see you guys on Monday night for the Stratosphere Studio.